After proving itself a fearsome warrior, the Wolf Knight dissolved into thin air, vanishing without a trace. Ruta stared at where the wolf had been standing.
Don't you think we should go back?
Greg lowered his trusty longsword, which he had fully utilized against the beast.
Yeah, we knew things would get dicey, but no one could have predicted this. At any rate, there's no chance those lost hunters survived. I'm not risking my life for nothing.
The Wolf Knight sure had been tough. The armor covering its entire body had protected the beast from most attacks, and every swing of its blade, powered by its bulking arms, packed a fatal punch. Beast-type phantoms were generally powerful and dexterous, but the wolf's armor made it too dangerous of a foe to be expected from a level 3 treasure vault. Even the level 4 Greg, with all of his experience in the field, would have had a rough time fending one off on his own. The party had taken out the phantom and come out mostly unscathed, only because they outnumbered the stray. Plus, Tino had constantly drawn its attention, keeping its attacks focused on her. If anyone in the party had been injured, things would have been different. They may not have been wiped out as a result, but the battle would have dragged on much longer. Without batting an eye, the leader of their party looked back at Greg and Ruta.
Nothing changes. We haven't even reached the vault.
This isn't the time to be stubborn. Your life's got to be worth more than that. That thing clearly came from the White Wolf's den. It's not every day a phantom leaves its vault, but the place is probably crawling with those things.
Ruta shuddered, gazing in the direction of the treasure vault.
When I came here the other day, there were only normal wolves.
The phantoms they had expected to find at the White Wolf's den were called red moons, large wolves named after the extinct silver moons. These were the phantoms that Ruta had encountered when she'd ventured into the vault solo a few weeks prior. She could handle a red moon somewhat comfortably on her own, but she had soon realized that she wouldn't stand a chance if she were surrounded by a pack of them, so she'd fled the vault. The Wolf Knight they had just encountered was far more challenging than a red moon. Ruta's dagger couldn't slice through the wolf's heavy armor. To deal any damage, she would have to go for its uncovered head or the unplated joints in its armor. At her current level, she would have a tough time aiming at its head while simultaneously dodging the fleet-footed beast's attacks. Some practice might change that, but she preferred not to practice her skills while risking her life. Tino shrugged as if she had expected the outcome.
This is just training.
Training.
Training?
Ruta felt a vast divide between herself and Tino, who was remarkably calm despite their abnormal situation. The girl's attitude suggested she'd overcome many a challenge this daunting. Ruta felt in Tino the root of First Step's prosperity.
And the great Greg has got it wrong.
Just call me Greg.
You've got it wrong, Greg.
Tino glanced at Gilbert, who was staring inquisitively at his sword. That relic was the most powerful weapon they had. Personality aside, the boy would probably be their best offense. Her master hadn't thrown a reckless child into her party for no reason. Watching Greg and Ruta fight had confirmed that their party had potential. Enough potential, at least, to keep Tino from retreating the party. She had been given all the pieces she needed to complete this quest. Her master was right, as always. Tino turned in the direction of the treasure vault, where the intermittent howls continued.
Master assigned us this quest because the hunters we are rescuing are still alive.
Greg's jaw hit the ground. Tino's claim defied all reason. Treasure vaults were deadly terrains. When a hunter went missing, they were 9 times out of 10 dead. Their odds were even worse in unpopular vaults like the White Wolf's den, where they couldn't seek out help from other hunters in the area. Even if there was a chance that a lost hunter was alive, the only way to be sure was to check out the vault. Now, Tino was claiming that her master knew, without leaving the capital, that these hunters were alive, when the most anyone could do to predict a lost hunter's survivability was calculate their odds based on how long they've been lost. If it had been anyone else that made this claim, Greg would not have believed it. Tino returned him an icy glare.
Every move my master makes is meaningful. Greg, what do you think it means to be one of the only level 8 hunters in the capital?
Breaking through the mold of treasure hunting, making the impossible possible, was what made Krai Andrey a level 8 hunter.
Right. If the targets are still alive, we have to keep going. Right, Gilbert?
Gilbert didn't answer. Instead, he scowled at his sword.
The Purgatorial Sword's out of juice. I just charged it up the other day. I can't recharge it on my own, you know?
What?
Every hunter knew to charge their relics in advance. The Purgatorial Sword especially required huge amounts of mana due to its high consumption. Since Gilbert didn't have enough mana of his own to recharge it, He frequently had it recharged by one of the city's magi that specialized in recharging relics. The last time Gilbert had recharged his sword was a few days ago. In preparation for First Step's recruitment drive, he hadn't even gone to a treasure vault since, so the sword should have had mana to spare. Examining it now, though, he had realized there wasn't a drop left. If there were a mage in their party, this wouldn't have been a problem, but none of them had the mana to charge it. Foreseeing what lay ahead in their quest, Tino muttered,
Master, why do you hate me?
They hadn't even reached the vault yet. The White Wolf's Den was a cave-type vault. Silver moons had been a highly intelligent and social species that formed large packs and shared dens in the ground. At the species peak, this particular den had hosted over 1,000 wolves. It stretched wide and deep like an anthill the size of a small village. Even after the silver moons had gone extinct and their den had transformed into a treasure vault, the cave had mostly retained its original structure. Tino sighed from behind a bush, where she observed the gaping entrance to the vast treasure vault. Before the silver moon's extinction, they had always guarded the entrance to their den. Now, however, that same entrance was guarded by wolf knights in crimson fur and full-body armor. Even from where she crouched, roughly 50 meters away, Tino could smell the beast's scent in the air. Their burning eyes glowed eerily in the darkness, and their drawn blades glinted dully in the moonlight.
Buck, it's not just swords. Some of them have bows and firearms.
Greg frowned.
Damn. Then it doesn't look like that stray was an outlier. Were they pumped up with mana material? What happened here?
When mana material that permeated the world pooled and reached high levels of concentration, it produced treasure vaults and phantoms. For one reason or another, mana material could become even more concentrated in certain areas, boosting vaults and phantoms to a higher level. This irregular phenomenon feared by hunters was called evolution. Evolution was a rare occurrence. Because mana material usually circulated the world along the vast network of ley lines below the Earth, there were limitations as to how much mana material could collect in any given location. Evolution was believed to be the result of environmental changes or the movement in ley lines that resulted in higher concentrations of mana material. The Zebridian Empire, which raked in a fortune from the surrounding treasure vaults, kept a keen eye on any shifts in the ley lines. If any sign of evolution was spotted, hunters were meant to be informed. However, neither Tino nor her party had heard a peep. Nonetheless, with the area teeming with numerous phantoms a step above what they'd expected to face, they had to face reality. Steadying her breath, Tino accessed the threat. The phantoms guarding the entrance were significantly larger than the red moons they had expected. Since the wolf knights were standing on their hind legs, they were twice as tall as red moons. From their earlier battle, the party had discovered that the phantom's strength and toughness had been buffed proportionately to their increase in size. In that regard, they'd been lucky to be able to assess the threat before arriving at the vault. In fact, even that initial encounter was likely a part of her master's plan.
The den was dug by silver moons to accommodate their size. The armored wolves won't be able to jump around inside, I think.
So we'd be better making a dash for the cave than facing them in the open. The problem is, I don't have a way to attack them long range.
5 wolf men stood guard outside the den. Though they wore identical thick armor, they all carried different weapons. 3 carried swords, 1 wielded a bow and arrow, and the last bore a long-barrel firearm that no one in the party recognized. Judging by the number of wolves and their formation, there was no way to get into the cave without being noticed by one. To avoid the risk of being trapped between the wolves around the entrance and those that lurked within the vault, running past the guards was a bad idea.
Are the lost hunters inside? Are you telling me these howling red flags didn't deter them?
It's possible they didn't notice the change until they were inside. And an evolved treasure vault isn't all bad. It also produces better relics.
Relics materialized in the same manner as phantoms. The denser the concentration of mana material, the more powerful the relics within. The unpopularity of the vault made it just as enticing. Fewer hands in the pot meant a better chance of scoring a relic.
Anyone have any long-range attacks?
Greg and Ruda exchanged looks. By long-range attacks, Tino had specifically meant those that could damage the wolf knights in spite of their armor. Ruda could throw her dagger, for example, but that wouldn't leave a scratch through the wolves' thick armor and fur. The group's silence spoke volumes to Tino, who realized how skewed their party truly was. Any normal party would have at least one member who specialized in long-range attacks. With both hands, Gilbert gripped the purgatorial sword on his back, shifting his weight.
All right, I'll charge. As long as I take out the bow and gun first, we can handle the rest.
Excuse me, you really are an idiot.
Mana or no mana, my sword's still better than a normal one. It's fine. I'm used to this kind of stuff.
Gilbert was wearing a set of thin metal-plated leather armor, which was common for hunters that preferred mobility to the protection of heavy armor. He was better shielded than Tino and Ruta, who dressed even lighter than he did, but that wasn't enough to make him a suitable decoy. Not only did his two-handed greatsword prevent him from carrying a shield, it also sacrificed agility for pure damage output. As a result, Gilbert was lackluster in dodging and blocking. Even still, the boy was untroubled, as though he was used to scrapes like this one.
You did say you carried your old party.
Gilbert snorted. Some hunters were more skilled than others, which meant that most parties had a standout member when it came to talent. Hunters who far exceeded the skill of the rest of their party often built habits of taking charge themselves, simply because that led to more wins. Doing so wasn't necessarily a harmful habit, but it could be a cause for conflict if a hunter like that found themselves in a party with equally matched members. Tino glared at Gilbert, preventing him from moving.
Don't step out of line. If you want to kill yourself, that's your problem. As leader of this party, I'm responsible for bringing you all home alive. Got it?
Huh?
Gilbert stared back in shock. After how their party had been formed and how Tino treated him, he hadn't expected her to show concern for his life. It would have been one thing if they had been hunting together for years, but this party had been thrown together mere hours ago. In the first place, if Tino wanted to, she was agile enough to easily get away from even a large pack of wolves. A small part of Gilbert had expected her to make him a human shield. It wasn't unthinkable in their line of work. Every gig was life or death, every man for himself. Tino saw this in Gilbert's reaction, and declared in contempt.
I will not leave anyone behind. Master expects me to perform as a party leader should. Bringing all of you back to the capital alive is the bare minimum requirement.
Tino knew full well that a hunter couldn't always afford idealism like that. At times, a leader had to cut a member off to protect the rest of the party. However, that wasn't expected of her today. She looked at him firmly, channeling her mentor as she said,
Don't mistake me for the kind of hunter that deserts her party members.
her master would have never given her a quest that required her to leave a hunter behind. Krai Andrey, the master of First Steps, would never allow that. Even though she was leading a ragtag party of strangers, no. Precisely for that reason, Tino Shade saw this as a test of her leadership. Breathing the cold night air, Tino steadied her beating heart. She then looked at each member of her party and said, with resolve befitting of a leader,
Ruta and I are faster, so we'll go out and draw them away. We've trained to dodge long-range weapons. Greg and Gilbert will ambush the archer and gunner from behind. Bows and guns are nothing to worry about when you get up close.
Please, let Tino survive. At least, get her to use the rest of them as shields if she has to. Gritting my teeth, I flew through the moonlit sky, piercing through the pummeling air. Thanks to the coat relic on my back, I was soaring like a loosed arrow. And, like a loosed arrow, there was no turning back for me. All I could do was steer as I shot through the darkness. In no time at all, I had passed over the gates nestled in the high walls that surrounded the capital. Now only a stretch of unlit road and the endless fields moved below me. Despite the picturesque view, all I could do was to try not to barf. The night hiker was a coat-type relic of midnight blue with a lining of white gems on the collar. As its name suggested, the relic granted its wearer the power of flight, which was an extremely rare ability for a relic to possess. Flight-granting relics that weren't vehicles were particularly popular and expensive. My night hiker was the only such relic in my collection, but it came with some serious drawbacks. The human missile incident involving the relic's previous owner had been a terrible tragedy that advertised both the item's convenience and danger to the public. With breakneck propulsion, the hunter had been rocketed into a ceiling and straight up to heaven. Before it could be destroyed, the night hiker, with the blood of a talented hunter on its clasp, had been taken in by me. There was no arguing that the relic was defective, but there was also no arguing that it allowed me to fly. It came with plenty of issues. I couldn't steer it with anything near precision, and it emphasized propulsion over gravity manipulation, so I couldn't use it to hover in place, unlike if I used some other flying relic. But hey, at least I could fly, and that thing had some serious speed. It was too fast for anyone to use safely. Every relic was based on some item in history. I would have liked to sit the inventor of the original item down and lecture him on the basics of flight safety. Before I knew it, I'd covered a distance that would have taken the average freak an hour to run, even at their superhuman pace. Now I was flying above the forest, traversing the woods on foot, navigating the dense trees while stepping over the rocks, roots and branches. Would have been exhausting, However, I had no such troubles. I was soaring above the canopies. The birds and beasts of the forest whined and shrieked as I whizzed past, but I was the one who should be shrieking. Soon, with my shaky vision, I somehow spotted the treasure vault, a gaping hole in the middle of a clearing. There were no other cave-type vaults in the area, so there was no mistaking it. The problem remained, however, that my coat didn't have any brakes. Biting down hard, I veered left and low, diving straight into the hole. Phantoms were neither randomly created nor invincible. Just as each relic materialized based off of an item that had once existed somewhere in the world, each phantom was born in the image of a creature that had once roamed the world. That meant that the hulking wolfmen and their blades had both existed before. Gilbert blocked one of the blades with his greatsword. His arms creaked, and his legs nearly buckled under the force of the wolf's overhead swing. But even so, Gilbert stood strong. The wolf knights, the wolf phantoms armed with various weapons, boasted terrible strength and toughness, as well as a dexterity unbecoming of their towering stature. Though the party had only fought a few of them, they had found that the wolf's strength surpassed Gilbert's, and that their dexterity was on par with Ruta's. The phantoms far outclassed the human hunters in both endurance and fortitude. Each of the wolves' attacks threatened grave injury. While Tino was more accustomed to dealing with dire threats, that wasn't the case for the others in her party, who wisely stuck to vaults they could traverse with relative safety. Still, there was one thing that Tino's party had a leg up on against their fearsome foes: teamwork. While Gilbert held the wolf knight's blade with his, Greg stepped up, using his longsword to pierce the joint between the knight's gauntlet and vambraces. As the phantom loosened its grip on its greatsword, Gilbert parried it to his left, letting the wolf strike the ground beside him. The wolf knight roared with anger, glaring with murderous intent at the two swordsmen. Then suddenly the hulking beast toppled over, its eyes still wide. Tino had crept up behind the knight, hopped up almost to the ceiling, and drove her blade into the back of its neck. The dark red short sword she held with both hands was a fortunate keepsake dropped by one of the wolf knights they defeated in the den. Tino had put her entire weight into her swing, slicing through the thick fur, muscle, and bone halfway into the wolf knight's neck. Dead on impact, the phantom dissipated without so much as a howl. Tino landed silently on her feet. Gilbert watched the wolf knight disappear and then heaved a breath of relief, his face mired with a hint of fatigue.
Ha! We did it.
Greg scowled at his hands, blushed with the effort of piercing wolf knight fur.
This quest is getting less worth it by the minute.
They were all forced to exert themselves to cut through the hard wolfskin. As Tino had predicted, the interior of the den was too small for the wolf knights to properly maneuver. Width of the place aside, the den's ceiling was so low, the wolves' heads nearly scraped it. This meant the wolves couldn't take to the air like the stray that had ambushed the party. On the other hand, the pressure of facing down large phantoms in a dark, claustrophobic space gnawed away at the party's morale. Having masterfully struck the wolf's neck, Tino assessed their battle, her expression unchanged.
It's not hard to take them down with the four of us. Each of them may be powerful, but they don't think to work together.
This was the wolf knights' most glaring weakness and the party's win condition. As fearsome as the knights were, they had no sense of cooperation. They ignored their kin in peril to charge at the enemy. Even when multiple wolf knights appeared at once, Tino was able to lure all but one away while her three party members took out the single wolf. This was a dangerous tactic in its own right, but it was effective in a situation like this, where fearsome beasts lurked at every corner.
And I found a weapon already.
If only they'd drop another one.
Tino preferred to fight empty-handed, but that didn't cut it against the wolf knights. While she carried a dagger short enough so as not to impede her movement, in this case, the blade was insufficient in both power and length. Finding a weapon that could one-shot a wolf knight if aimed at its weak spot was a lucky break. Ruta sighed in relief, having dedicated her energy to watching their surroundings and keeping lookout for openings. As tense and exhausted as the party members were, their exploration was going smoothly. With two thieves on the team, they didn't have to worry about being ambushed. Avoiding wolf knights wasn't difficult when the beasts usually wandered the den alone. Even when the party had had to fight, their makeshift teamwork had gotten them through. Gilbert had some mettle to back up his talk, and Greg had enough experience that he could match the pace of his party mates. All the pair had to do was stop a wolf knight in its tracks so that Tino could finish it off. Alternately, if Tino had a wolf knight distracted, they would instead do the honors. While Ruta wasn't involved in the flashy combat, she carried her weight. If not for Tino, she would have been the party's sole scout, and her presence allowed Tino to focus on fighting. The party balance was a delicate one that would fail if any one of them were to get hurt. But so far, they were making it through the vault. Everything seemed calculated and pre-planned, even the earlier weapon drop. As ludicrous as the notion seemed, Tino couldn't help but believe it.
Master was right. Master is the best.
Party and clan leaders who had to direct and command other self-assertive hunters had to be charismatic. Tino's trust for her clan master seemed overzealous to Greg, who hadn't sensed a lick of charisma from the guy upon facing him. Greg was confident in the eyes he had trained through years of treasure hunting, and he hadn't sensed the star power that great hunters possessed. At the recruitment event, when he had first been told who Krai was, he thought it was a joke. Even now, after learning that the guy was the Thousand Tricks, Greg couldn't quite believe it, nor could he take Tino's word that every step of their quest had been calculated. He would have sooner believed that Krai had earned his level 8 rank through connections and bribery, but the undeniable trust Tino, a very capable hunter, had in Krai prevented him from arguing. Greg had no intention of causing strife during a hunt, so he swallowed his words. If the group made it back alive, he'd have chances to test Krai's genius for himself. For now, he had to focus on surviving that bizarre treasure vault. Tino's shoulders quivered as she looked at Greg, who was sheathing his longsword.
There has to be more. This is nothing compared to Master's usual trials.
Huh? What are you talking about?
Any sane hunter would have fled the den by now. Hunters expected the unexpected when entering a treasure vault they had no information on, but such unexpected events arising there was a sign of a major disturbance. Neither Ruta, Greg, nor Gilbert could imagine any harsher trial than this.
We'll proceed with caution. There was no sign of anyone near the entrance, no bodies, no belongings. They should be farther in.
Gilbert Bush's every sense was ablaze, unclouded by his fatigue, the electrifying air of the battlefield, the putrid stench, and the powerful, never-before-seen phantoms brought him elation rather than fear. I can't do this anymore. I can't keep up with you. I quit. A young man in Gilbert's old party had said the day before Gilbert left. They had stuck together since Gilbert's first day in the city. The young man was 3 years older and more experienced than Gilbert, but he was also noticeably less skilled. He had worked hard at his craft, always striving to improve himself and seeking advice from other hunters. Still, Gilbert had left him in the dust. Gilbert, too, had always put in his share of effort. Back then, he had loathed the man's decision, as well as that of the remaining party members who'd followed suit, but now that he found himself in a treasure vault beyond his skill level, he was beginning to understand their way of thinking. The decision his former party mates made had been for all of them. Gilbert now felt that he should have been more considerate of their feelings. More than that, however, fighting alongside party members of equal or greater skill than him was a rush. Gilbert had only hunted with one party, barring the occasional temp arrangement, so he had only ever hunted with those weaker than him. Now, though, he had allies he could count on. Greg wasn't as powerful with the sword as Gilbert was, but he was deft enough with it to strike the joints in the wolf's armor, and Tino's leap into the decisive blow to the wolf's neck had been nothing short of spectacular. While Ruta, with her meager weapon, hadn't dealt a significant blow to a wolf, she had managed all tasks expected of a thief, from spotting enemies to diverting their attention, all of which required a finesse Gilbert had no shred. Fighting the formidable wolf knight as a team had ignited a feeling within Gilbert that he hadn't felt for a long time. That feeling raced through Gilbert's heart, fueling him as he pushed onward. With every battle, his sword felt lighter. A few hours had passed since they had entered the vault, but Gilbert showed no sign of slowing down.
Having a good time, kid?
Ha! I'm just getting started.
Let This Grieving Soul Retire by Tsupikaze, cast by Artale Studio. If you are interested in creating your own audiobooks, please check out our website at artale.ai. Now, enjoy the story. At first, Gilbert had struggled to hold off a wolf knight's blade, but now when their swords clashed, he could start to push back. It wasn't that he hadn't been giving it his all from the start. Physically or mentally, Gilbert was growing stronger. As another wolf knight crumbled to the ground, Gilbert's heavy breaths pumped his shoulders. He let out a longing sigh at his sword.
If only there were mana in here.
The Purgatorial sword had completely lost its use as a relic, but neither Gilbert nor anyone else in the party had enough mana to recharge it. If Gilbert were able to utilize the sword's ability, he would have been able to take out the wolf knights much more easily. Even though it was impossible for him to perform a feat like Thousand Tricks had, he could have at least burned through the Phantom's blades. In turn, the party's exploration would have gone much more smoothly.
You shouldn't even be using a relic yet. Rely on a relic and you'll become rusty. That's why I don't use one.
By now, Gilbert had grown accustomed to his tiny leader's condescension.
Do you not have one, then?
Now that he thought about it, Gilbert realized he had never seen Tino use a relic. Earning level 4 usually required a hunter to dive into enough treasure vaults to at least find a few relics, regardless of their quality. As a member of a large clan, Tino could even be gifted one by a fellow member. Gilbert looked at her with curiosity.
A relic is an ace up the sleeve. It shouldn't be used in normal fights, and you shouldn't jump into fights where you'll need your relic to win. Part of this quest is meant to teach you that. I'm sure of it. Master didn't drain the mana from your sword out of spite.
Some teacher he is.
He found the story incredible, but Tino not using a relic backed up her claim. Besides, she had stomped all over him back when they both fought barehanded. He looked down at the purgatorial sword again.
That's why all relics I find in treasure vaults are given to Master through Lizzie, my mentor. Master assesses the relic, and if it's a good one, he takes me out for ice cream. Master knows all.
Greg's eyelids twitched.
Sounds like he's using you to fetch relics.
No, Master doesn't like sweet things, but he takes me anyway. Master is the best.
Gilbert agreed with Greg, but seeing how serious Tino was, he held his tongue. After just under an hour's walk, the party came upon an open space. The tired Ruta used the back of her hand to wipe the sweat from her brow before slowly surveying the area. It was at least wide enough for several wolf knights to stand side by side. Tino was breathing calmly, her clothing unblemished, her expression as calm as it had been when they had first entered the vault.
We should be close to the Alpha's lair. It used to be the domain to the Alpha Silver Moon before the den became a treasure vault.
Greg scowled.
Boss room? Want to rest up for a bit?
Boss room was hunter lingo for the heart of a treasure vault where an especially powerful phantom was most likely to appear. After all, phantoms didn't materialize at random. Generally speaking, phantoms grew stronger the deeper one ventured into a vault due to a higher concentration of mana material. Historical treasure vaults in particular had specific locations that generated the most powerful phantoms. If the vault was a castle, the boss room was most likely the throne room. If it was a tower, they'd appear on the highest floor. And if the vault was a ship, you'd guess right to check the captain's quarters. In this case, the boss room was the Alpha's lair. There was no guarantee that a boss would actually appear, but approaching the room demanded caution. Tino reassessed her party. Ruta was level 3, while the rest of them were level 4. By the time a hunter reached level 3, their physical endurance was buffed by their continuous intake of mana material. Every battle fought in the vault this day had been life or death for them, but Gilbert and Ruta could keep going. Their faces showed some weariness, but not enough for them to stop moving. Gilbert caught Tino's look and held up his fist.
I can do this for days.
I can go for a few more battles.
Nowhere in a treasure vault was truly safe. A member of the party capable of setting up a barrier could guarantee a certain degree of safety for their party when they wanted to rest, but not one of them was capable of doing so. Besides, there was a good chance a patrolling wolf knight would spot the party anyway. Resting in a place like this wasn't all that restful when all was said and done. Tino made her decision they'd charge into the storm. Resting whenever possible was an important part of keeping a party alive, but this party was in good shape. It would be best for them to check off the boss room while they were still on a roll.
We'll check out the boss room first. The lost hunter should be somewhere nearby, so we'd better pick him up and get out of here.
All right, Chief. Let's do this.
Greg took a deep breath and turned towards the boss room, careful not to make a sound. The party walked along the edge of the path towards the boss room. The only light in the den was produced by a series of glowing stones placed a few meters apart, most likely by hunters who'd come before them. Roughly 10 meters away from the boss room, Tino stopped. She closed her eyes and placed her palm flat against the dirt wall. There, she focused entirely on the sounds and smells of the den, searching for any distant signs of life. She felt the flow of cold air brushing past her face and listened to the heartbeats and hushed breaths of her allies. After searching for some time, Tino let out a long sigh.
Something's there.
Greg grunted.
Any chance it's the wayward hunters?
It's most likely the boss. Master's quests usually involve a big boss.
For real?
Greg didn't know whether he should have been surprised or incredulous. Phantoms that appeared in boss rooms were a step or two above the other phantoms that appeared in vaults. Judging by the strength of the wolf knights the party had faced, the boss wouldn't be so impossibly powerful that they couldn't defeat it. By rational treasure hunting standards, though, a move like this was foolhardy. Ordinarily, the boss room would have been inhabited by a particularly large and powerful red moon, but the party couldn't count on that this time. What's worse, they hadn't found a single relic in the vault. Other hunters certainly weren't missing out.
Shouldn't we run?
Tino's shapely brows slightly pinched.
You said that already. That said, we've come this far unscathed. We can handle the boss.
Greg scowled, taking in Tino's words. She sure had a point, but he couldn't bring himself to agree with her. For one thing, the Wolf Knights were much stronger than the phantoms in the vaults Greg usually frequented. A hunter's number one concern was keeping themselves safe. One rule of thumb for deciding whether or not to take on a treasure vault was considering whether the hunter could take on the phantoms alone. If Greg had known the current state of the White Wolf's den, he would not have joined the party. The quest they'd been roped into was a charity case that paid little to nothing in both coin and relics. He had joined mostly out of curiosity because a member of the Steps had invited him. If the same offer had come from a random hunter, he would have laughed them out of the bar, especially if he had known that he'd face phantoms stronger than those he was accustomed to. Greg stroked the hilt of the long sword sheathed on his belt. It wasn't an especially well-made sword, but he had taken good care of it these past few years.
You're too cautious to have a face like that.
The rest of the party stared back at her.
We don't grow from easy quests. You are a good hunter, Greg. Being cautious isn't a bad thing, but you need to take risks if you want to do more than survive.
But
Greg was at a loss for words. He had to admit the girl had made a good point. The death rate among treasure hunters was high compared to those of other careers, but most of those deaths were accounted for by rookies. The longer a hunter worked in the field, the less likely they were to die. Improving their craft was one reason for that, of course, but the larger contributing factor was that a seasoned hunter took fewer risks, playing it safe, and never taking on a foe they had a chance of losing to. As hunters watched their friends and comrades die, the less adventurous they became. This led to many experienced hunters idling around level 3, while some younger hunters rose through the ranks as quickly as Gilbert had. While mana material strengthened hunters physically, the substance had no effect mentally. Most hunters hovered at or below level 3 because raising a level required accumulating points in the association system, and those points were hard to come by without venturing into treasure vaults of appropriate levels. What really encouraged most hunters to remain stagnant was the reality that a level 3 hunter could make a decent living just by taking on vaults below their level. So, Greg was now level 4, having passed the level 3 threshold, but he hadn't gained a level in a long time. He would have been lying if he said that wasn't a sore spot for him.
Greg, I think you came to first steps after all those years because you wanted to do something about that.
Greg bit his lip, unable to speak. Tino's observation struck home. He couldn't remember when he had last dared visit a vault with a phantom this powerful.
I'm pretty sure that's why Master added you to this party.
What?
This quest is the perfect opportunity for you to step out of your comfort zone. Otherwise, Master had no reason to put you in the party after such a brief meeting with you. He intends to save all of us. That's why Master is the best.
Well,
Greg swallowed. In truth, he had been wondering how he'd managed to catch the attention of Thousand Tricks. His interaction with Krai had been very brief and not a very pleasant one. He could have imagined why Ruta had been inducted into the party, but his own recruitment had baffled him. When Tino had waltzed into the bar, he'd even thought she'd got the wrong guy.
Don't tell me you thought my master appointed you all at random. He would never play around like that. This whole situation is according to his meticulous calculation. As I told you, Master is the best.
Greg turned to Gilbert, unable to believe his ears. Whether or not Krai was the best, Tino's assessment made sense. The only problem was that their impression of Krai was so grotesquely incongruent with the man that Tino described. Greg shuddered as a certain moniker passed through his mind. Thousand Tricks, title of the level 8 hunter whom everyone had heard of but no one knew anything about.
Then why was I invited?
Tino pondered the question before eyeing Ruta up and down with disgust. Her gaze halted on Ruta's breasts, which far outclassed her own. Despite both of them wearing similar leather jackets, Ruta's curves had morphed her own almost into a different design. In the face of this realization, Tino looked more grave than she had while facing the phantoms. Tino's master had told her that Ruta was just some girl who wanted to go to the White Wolf's den. Tino, of course, saw through this front. That was too flimsy a reason to appoint a party member for this life-threatening mission. If Krai were honest about his motivation for choosing Ruta, then his follow-up about how Lil Gilbert and the great Greg would do would also be true. Her dear master would never do such a thing. Much to Ruta's confusion, Tino's gaze remained severe. Then, finally, Tino relented.
I don't know. Probably because of those large breasts of yours. I'll grow bigger soon enough, unlike Lizzie, who's finished growing.
Ruta was overcome with shock.
What? Wait, what did you say?
Enough chit-chat. Let's take out the boss and complete the request. I'll take the lead.
Hey, wait! What are you talking about?
Ignoring Ruta's dismay, Tino approached the boss room. Wolf Knights were hulking phantoms powerful, tough, and agile. Their aggressiveness made them fearsome opponents, but in terms of agility, they were far outdone by Tino. Tino's mentor, Liz Smart, was a thief herself, and Tino had practiced sparring against Liz countless times. After all those times of Tino being beaten up by an opponent far faster than herself, her eyes could follow the every move of the Wolf Knights, whose attacks were much slower than those she had faced in her training. Even if the boss were a couple steps above them, she could at least keep up with it. The problem was whether the party could penetrate that thick armored fur. It wasn't normally a thief's job to defeat phantoms. As such, most of Tino's training had been dedicated to bolstering her agility rather than training her to kill.
I think it's alone. Let's take care of it before other phantoms arrive.
Tino's party readied themselves, their two frontliners drawing their weapons. Ruta herself unsheathed her dagger and took a step back, ready to stand guard and fend off any intrusions. It was an important role that protected the party from being trapped between two groups of phantoms, since none of them could take on a Wolf Knight on their own.
We don't know what's in there. Why don't I go first?
Tino took a deep breath and smiled.
Don't worry yourself. Lizzie always says the first blow sets the mood, so it's mine.
The mood? It's the most dangerous part. Why does it matter who makes the first move?
Tino flexed her limbs. After completing her warm-up, she nodded.
'Cause I'm a hunter.
With that, she darted towards the boss room. The boss room was sizable, spanning at least 10 meters in diameter. In addition to the tunnel, Tino entered through narrow openings branched off to the left and right. The ceiling was much higher than that of the rest of the den, enough to clear two Wolf Knights standing on top of each other. The party had descended much farther than Tino had realized. However, even the expansive boss room seemed cramped around the enormous figure in its center. A humongous wolf wielding a crimson battle axe as large as Tino's entire body. The wolf itself, clad from the shoulders down, joints and all, in black plate armor, was substantially larger than the Wolf Knights the party had faced thus far. Combined with its towering frame, it promised an even more dangerous battle than the party had experienced against the other wolves in the den. What made this wolf stand apart most of all, however, was its striking moon-silver fur that shone in ominous contrast to the blood-red fur of the Wolf Knights. Its ferocious silver face was half covered by a human skull, as if to exude its revulsion for all of mankind. Unhurriedly, the Silver Wolf Knight, reminiscent of the long-extinct Silver Moons, caught Tino in its gaze. The wolf had the dignity of a king. In the wolf's eyes, Tino saw its savage intent to maul and slaughter the intruders. The wolf howled as Tino dashed past it. Compared to this massive Wolf Knight, Tino was a rat scurrying past it at annoying speed. The wolf's gaze followed, and its eyes met Tino's once again. The Wolf King brought its axe around, the plates of its armor screeching from the friction. Tino steadied her breath, noting the beastly stench in the room. Tino had expected to face a wolf completely covered in armor, but that didn't make her prospects any better. Even Tino's powerful kicks couldn't break through that armor. If she attempted a kick against those steadfast plates and injured her leg, she'd be done for. A drop in her agility now would mean certain death. With the phantom's tremendous size, Tino wasn't even confident she could knock it off balance. Her heart tightened with trepidation and even more so by exhilaration. The blade of the axe, at least a meter long, came rushing towards her. Battle axes were difficult weapons to control, with most of their weight balanced towards the heads. Maintaining posture while swinging the weapon took great strength, but the Wolf King had swung it as though it were a wooden stick. With a decisive sidestep, Tino dodged the blade. Like a pendulum, the axe whisked past her, severing the very air and assaulting her with a powerful gust. If a blow so forceful were to so much as graze her arm, Tino would have been knocked off her feet. Blood-red wolf eyes brimming with curdling hatred followed Tino's movement. The looming beast turned, its mere step making the walls quake around them. Despite its size, the wolf was far from sluggish. This thing was strong. Still shaken by the vehement attack, Tino racked her brain for a path to victory. She was confident she could flee if she wanted to. Defeating it was another story. Even Gilbert would struggle to block its battle axe head-on, and the purgatorial sword would have no chance of slicing through its armor. Tino ducked under the wolf's raised arm, slashing with her short sword at its armored leg. In the wake of the clashing metal, only a thin scratch was left on its armor. The wolf hadn't even budged. Worse yet, the wolf was intelligent. While its eyes, burning for violence, followed Tino, the wolf kept its guard up. Unlike with the other Wolf Knights they'd faced, a surprise attack wouldn't cut it. The remainder of Tino's party ran up to the throne room and stopped when they saw the King of Wolves from behind. The plan had been for Tino to keep the boss occupied so the others could attack. However, the other members saw, just as plainly as Tino did, that the wolf was too alert to fall for it. Gilbert and Greg swiftly shifted gears. Drawing their swords, they split up to flank the wolf from both sides.
What is that thing?
I've never seen anything like this.
On full alert, Ruda remained a few paces away from the action, observing the beast from head to toe. Even as the silver wolf became surrounded by 4 foes, it remained unfazed, like a king standing in court. "We'll go for the head," Tino concluded. While the boss wolf was far more powerful than the ordinary wolf knight, this wolf lacked a helmet. That meant its weakness was most likely the same as its counterparts. The problem was that the boss was much taller than the wolves they'd previously fought. Tino would have to make a tremendous leap to reach as high as the beast's head, and during that time she'd be defenseless. Attacking from behind wouldn't work either. The boss would simply swat them away. Though the Wolf King kept an eye on every human in the room, it devoted the majority of its attention to Tino. Its behavior displayed the wolf's almost human-like intelligence.
What's our move?
Wanna retreat?
Fortunately, neither Gilbert, Greg, nor Ruda was overcome with fear. Tino had seen their courage in action plenty of times on their way here. If her party mates had been cowards, they would have turned tail long before even entering the den. If the team had any chance of victory, it lay with that courage. Tino alone could handle a wolf knight, but she stood no chance against this boss. But now, she had allies, party members who'd fought alongside her to bring them this far. Tino, beholding the wolf scorching with animosity, understood their ordeal for what it was, a trial. Krai Andrey often sent clan members on trials of life or death. The Grievers called these the 1,000 Trials. These trials were the first steps towards glory. Tino knew what lay ahead of her.
Stop one blow. I'll figure it out from there.
Ruda had never experienced a more turbulent battle. The enormous battle axe flew through the air like a tornado. Armed with the purgatorial sword, Gilbert parried the axe blows coming at him from above and from the sides. His knuckles grew whiter with every clash of the blade. While Gilbert's sword was sizable in its own right, it dwarfed in comparison to the Wolf King's battle axe. The axe swings were relatively slow but incredibly powerful, inching Gilbert back as he was forced to parry. Blocking it head-on was not an option. As reckless as Gilbert was in his several years as a hunter, he had some experience facing enemies stronger than himself. His face was sweaty and his breathing heavy, but Gilbert managed to stand strong, deflecting deadly blow after deadly blow. Meanwhile, Greg had been cutting and stabbing at the wolf between each of Gilbert's parries. However, Greg's sharp attacks against the wolf's wrist, elbow, and axe haft did no more than slow the wolf for a fraction of a second.
Damn it, its armor's too tough.
The Wolf King was not a terribly adept fighter, less skilled than the 4 humans opposing it at least. Still, the beast was using its brute strength, agility, and size to overwhelm the hunters. Its whirling battle axe flew towards Greg and Gilbert while keeping Tino, who was camped in the wolf's blind spot, at bay. There was no doubt about it, the Silver Wolf Knight was assessing its foes. Its priority was neither Gilbert with his great sword, nor Greg, the largest member of the party, but Tino, the slender leader of the group. Ruda shuddered at its level of intelligence that she'd never before seen in a phantom, but at the same time, she marveled at her party mates as they faced off against the wolf. Tino dodged the battle axe, avoiding it by a hair's breadth. A few strands of her sheening black hair were whisked away, severed by the blade. Sweat glistened on her face as the axe swept past, but her eyes remained open. She wasn't afraid, and Ruda couldn't understand how that was possible. How could Tino move like that? How could she coolly duck under an attack that could have lopped off her head if she'd moved just a moment too late? Tino wasn't all that fast. No matter how quickly she moved, she couldn't outrun the swinging axe. As Tino danced circles around the behemoth battle axe and the looming threat of violent death, Ruda saw true courage in Tino. She was moved by it. Having worked solo up until now, she had never witnessed a superior thief in action, save at the Association training grounds. Even then, she had witnessed talent, but nothing that had moved her to the core. Something about Tino and the way she refused to back down from such a fearsome foe resonated with Ruda in the way that nothing else had. A thief's job wasn't to fight. In fact, Tino joining combat at all might have been a mistake. Even still, Ruda shuddered with overwhelming admiration for the girl a little younger than herself.
Damn it! He's not slowing down.
Phantoms, like people, had limited stamina, but the wolf's blows showed no sign of abating. With every parry, Gilbert's arms suffered unimaginable strain. If his sword hadn't been a relic, it would have long been shattered. Gilbert and Greg dogged the battle axe after every swing. It was a close battle, but even Ruta could tell from afar that the Wolf King had a leg up on them. It was a miracle that none of them had sustained any serious wounds. But miracles don't last forever.
What?
With wide eyes, Gilbert and Tino followed the blade, but Greg was even more surprised than they were. He held one half of his longsword in his hand. The other half clattered to the ground nearby. Ruta and the Silver Wolf were the first to react. Time slowed to a crawl. Ruta saw the wolf's muzzle contort into a sinister grin. The creature's eyes set on Greg. The battle axe rose high into the air. Out of instinct, Ruta threw her dagger, which flew towards the wolf's face. It was a spur-of-the-moment action. Even if the dagger had struck the Wolf King, the human skull it wore and its thick fur would have prevented the dagger from leaving a scratch. However, the Wolf Knight reacted keenly to the projectile. Tilting the battle axe, it deflected the dagger, gaining the humans a split-second enough time for Gilbert to snap out of his astonishment and meet the plunging battle axe. Parrying the axe would send it into Greg, so Gilbert blocked the blade straight on, exerting every drop of his strength to hold the blade at bay. The struggle lasted for only a moment before Gilbert's knees buckled, and he was sent flying backward. However, he bought them another second. By the time the axe fell again, Ruta had sprinted across the room. She couldn't abstain from fighting when the party needed her the most. The blade of the axe swept over Ruta's back, splitting the air where Greg had stood only a moment before. The blade made a loud boom as it pierced deep into the ground. Greg and Ruta tumbled to the ground, rolling over to face the Wolf King. They were now completely vulnerable and would have been goners if Tino hadn't jumped in. The thief was already in the air, having leapt from the butt of the axe before the wolf could lift it. Shock mired the loathing expression on the Wolf Knight's face. The king made a split-second decision, releasing the axe in its left paw to swat at Tino, who was already above the boss's head. The wolf's claw extended towards the soaring girl, catching her right leg. Tino's face contorted in pain as blood sprayed from the shallow cut. Even so, her flight continued as she soared in an arc over the Wolf Knight until she landed on the beast's back. The crimson shortsword gleamed in her hand as the wolfman squirmed. Then, without so much as a cry, she swiftly thrust the sword into the phantom's neck. The beast's massive frame jerked upward. Its bloodshot eyes rolled into its head, and its arms flailed blindly in an attempt to snatch Tino. But in the end, its claws never landed. The wolf crumbled to its knees. Once Tino had let go of its back and landed safely on the ground, the hulking phantom turned to dust.
Did we do it?
Gilbert muttered in disbelief, his shoulders rising and falling with his heavy breaths. For the first time since embarking on this quest, he sounded as young as he looked. With a heavy clang, the purgatorial sword fell to the ground.
We won.
Tino declared in a monotone voice, holding her sliced right thigh. She sat on the ground, inspecting the long cut across her fair skin. The claw, as sharp as any sword, had luckily missed her arteries, but she couldn't let it go untreated. Tino let out a short sigh, clenching her teeth to bear the dull pain accompanied by trickling blood.
It was a close call.
If she hadn't finished off the Wolf King when she did, the injury would have prevented her from running, let alone defeating the beast. She reached towards her belt for a potion pack that held 5 vials, and plucked one filled with a pink liquid. It was a healing potion created by an alchemist. These potions, created through a combination of magic and science, instantly healed injuries, although they weren't as potent as a cleric's healing spell. Potions like these were must-haves in a party without a healer. Tino popped the cap off the vial, pulled on her shorts to expose her thigh, and poured the liquid over the cut. She groaned at the sting, but the wound that ran almost the entire length of her thigh soon closed. Greg sat up, taking in the broken sword he still held in his hand. The color drained from his face as what had happened finally sank in.
Damn! I thought for sure I was dead. Just my luck that my sword broke at a time like this, though.
You're pretty lucky to be alive, old man.
Greg forced a laugh.
She can say that again. You really saved my skin, kiddo.
Nah, I'm just glad I got to you just in time. Are you all right, Tino?
I'm good. I can still walk. Time will heal it.
Tino's potion was an expensive item that could heal most non-lethal wounds given time. Wiping the blood from her leg, Tino rose slowly to her feet. Gilbert sighed in relief at seeing his leader unharmed. Their enemy was more fearsome than anything he had faced before. If he had been with his old party, there would be little chance of him surviving the battle, even if his sword had been fully charged. The fact that they'd come out on top while pretty much unscathed was nothing short of a miracle. Doing so would have been impossible without everyone in the party working together. Now that the threat had passed, fear of death rushed over Gilbert. He slowly exhaled, trying to steady his heartbeat.
Even the boss leaves nothing behind, huh?
Tough luck for us. Bosses are way more likely to drop stuff than other phantoms are.
He retrieved the end of his trusty sword and carefully sheathed both halves. Reforging a sword snapped in two was difficult and unwise. Smelting both halves was the best Greg could do, which would leave him in the red after the mission's meager pay.
On the bright side, you're alive. You can always buy another sword.
Yeah, can't argue with that.
Here, it's shorter than yours, but it should be better than nothing.
Thanks.
He took the sword and tested its weight by flourishing it a few times. The party had defeated the boss, but they were yet to meet their objective. Even then, they would have to make it back out of the vault alive. Unlike monsters, phantoms materialized out of mana material, so even the path they'd taken to get there could be repopulated before they made it out. Greg and Gilbert sat on the ground, exhausted, gulping down the contents of their canteens.
With a boss like that, the Lost Hunters are still in danger.
Greg blinked for a moment.
Huh? Oh yeah, the level 5S, right? The boss probably got them.
Level 5?
The Wolf King had been formidable, even more so than in the worst-case scenario Tino had imagined before their arrival. With 3 level 4S and a level 3 in the party, they had barely squeezed in a victory, though that was partially down to Gilbert and Greg outperforming Tino's expectations. If she'd faced the boss alone, she might have died. There was a chance that level 5 hunters could have lost. Since levels were merely assigned by the association, the difference between levels 4 and 5 was largely insignificant. Higher levels like 7 or 8 could only be achieved by leaving a legacy of extraordinary treasure hunting. But achieving level 5 required no more combat strength than that required for reaching level 4. Tino reevaluated the boss room. It was spacious, with a high ceiling and illuminated by the glowing stones embedded in the walls. The stones were enough to dimly light the ground, but Tino saw no blood or any other sign of the lost hunters. Since the White Wolf's den wasn't too expansive, it was hard to imagine the hunters going missing without a trace. Even if they'd been struggling to fight through the phantoms, level 5 hunters would have left behind some sort of sign or marker for the rescue party, but there was nothing at all. Tino thought some more, reminding herself that this was a trial one that her master saw fit for her to undertake. With that in mind, she concluded this had to be a mystery that even she could solve.
Master, I don't understand.
Just then, she heard a sound. As she looked up to identify it, the rest of the party noticed her expression.
What's up, Chief?
Get up. Something's coming.
Is it more phantoms?
Tino's party members forced themselves to their feet, pulling themselves back from the brink of exhaustion. Something came flying through the air, which Tino dodged with a half step. A long crimson arrow flew past, piercing the wall behind her. For the first time since entering the dungeon, Tino grew pale.
What the?
There, blocking the path they'd taken into the boss room, stood a silver wolf knight, clad in black plate armor. Except, it wasn't just one, 4 pairs of blood-red eyes glared at Tino and her party. Had the boss they'd just defeated been waiting for reinforcements? The thought crossed Tino's mind. In hindsight, the phantom had seemed too careful, as if it had been trying to buy time. The earth shook as the 4 wolfmen marched towards them.
This is impossible.
Each wolf knight looked identical to the one they had just defeated, except for the type of weapon each of them held. A great sword, a humongous club that nearly reached the ceiling, a bow clearly not meant to be used in a cave, and a gun that trailed a coil of ammo across the ground, indicating its rapid-fire capabilities. The wolves didn't rush in, but seemed to relish in their display of superiority. Still, their eyes of the first boss.
How is this happening? We just defeated it.
Was that thing now the boss?
They already knew that, in theory, a treasure vault could hold more than one boss. Even so, they hadn't expected this.
Master, this is too much. I can't take it.
Tino couldn't believe it. Sure, her trial had gone more smoothly than other trials thus far, but she saw no way out against this. Stunned, Tino brushed her finger along her injured thigh. There was still some pain, and she couldn't be as agile as she'd been before. If her wound reopened in the midst of battle, the party would be done for. The Silver Wolf Knights stood in formation, dwarfing the humans by comparison. The great sword and club wielders stood the closest, followed by the wolves wielding the bow and the gun. In contrast to the thoughtless behavior of the Crimson Wolf Knights, the Silver Wolves' disciplined movements rivaled those of the Imperial Army.
What do we do?
What can we do?
The party looked to their leader. Tino maintained her calm facade. It was her job to make the tough decisions. If she crumbled now, the whole party would fall apart. There was no one Tino herself could turn to.
We have to do it.
The wound on Tino's leg wasn't overly deep, but running wasn't an option. If they did, the pair of long-ranged weapons the wolves possessed guaranteed that they'd be shot in the back. Tino was fast, but she couldn't move faster than a flying bullet, nor could she take down the two wolf knights with the bow and gun at the same time. Still, she couldn't give up. She had to fight. She had to live. Tino carried the weight of her party members' lives on her shoulders. Tino wrangled her spirit away from the brink of despair, her heart drumming under a different kind of tension than she usually felt in combat. They couldn't take them all out. They had to find the best way to survive. The only thing that kept Tino going was her trust in her master. She knew he would never leave her with an impossible challenge, and that was the one thought keeping her sane. Keeping her attention on the wolf knights, Tino glanced at the tunnel to the right, which also led out of the boss room. The silver wolves were even bigger than the wolf knights and would be inhibited by the low and narrow corridor.
We can't take them on in here. There's too much space. We have to make it to the passage to the right. In there, we can face fewer at a time, and the sword and club will get caught on the walls and ceiling. I'll take the rear.
And so, their desperate battle began. The harmony of the four wolves could be equated to a physical attack. The humans leaned forward to endure the sound waves. The movements of the four silver wolves were chillingly calculated. Perhaps they understood that their kin had been vanquished by the humans before them. As if to trap the party, the wolves shifted their formation to block off the boss room exits. As the wolf with the club moved to block the path to the right, Gilbert took a step towards it. Since defeating them all at once would be impossible, being trapped in this space meant certain death. As if to scare his hopelessness away, he bellowed and swung the purgatorial sword. Not one hint of his tiredness showed in his blow. In fact, this might have been the sharpest swing of the sword he'd shown that day. A flicker of flame rose on the thick crimson blade. Gilbert had instinctively poured a breath of magic into his sword. The flaming blade was strong enough to slice through metal armor. The silver wolf knight swiped its club. The destructive force of the blow struck Gilbert's sword and sent him flying. Ruda cried out as his body tumbled across the ground. Fortunately, he was still conscious. Gilbert rose to his feet, all hope drained from within him.
I can't parry that.
The blow was just too powerful, too immense to block or repel. With his sword out of mana, Gilbert couldn't even attempt to cut through the club. Short sword in hand, Greg sprinted towards the same wolf knight. The wolf brought its club back up. A gust of wind rushed at Greg, and he dived backward as the spiked pillar rushed before his eyes. The club carried even more mass than the battle axe. With a casual swing of the giant weapon, the wolf would tear through leather armor in the hunter beneath it. Greg doubted that a set of metal armor would give any greater protection. Ruda drew another dagger and threw it. There was no longer time to watch from afar. The wolf with the great sword howled and took a step forward. Tino, in a deadly gambit, ran straight towards it. She sidestepped just in time to avoid the blade swinging down from overhead, then leapt back to once again avoid the sword as the wolf swiped up with it. While the great sword moved faster than the battle axe, Tino could still dodge it, but one hit from the thing would slice her to pieces. Her eyes met the wolf's. She couldn't see a path to victory. Now that she'd given her short sword to Greg, there was no way for her to damage them. She drew her dagger but doubted it could pierce their hide at all. As the team steeled themselves, Tino racked her brain. There had to be a way to complete her master's trial. She considered drawing fire from the bow and gun wolves to make them shoot each other, but it wasn't possible. Neither wolf showed any sign of attacking, either to avoid that very tactic or out of confidence that their two wolf brethren were enough to take care of the humans. That said, they didn't have to defeat them. Their first step was to get out of the boss room. Tino weaved through the flashes of the blade, her wounded thigh aching. She noted that the wolf knight with the metal-coated club was much slower than the wolf with the great sword. Perhaps she and Ruda could make it past the club wielder, leaving the men behind. The thought was immediately dropped from her mind. There was no time. As soon as she stopped diverting the attention of the wolf with the great sword, the wolf would kill Greg and Gilbert before she could take out the club wielder from behind. Tino's offensive capabilities were simply too insufficient. The wolf knight with the club stood on guard, keeping Gilbert and Greg back. Gilbert occasionally ventured an attack, but those attacks were always met with calm parries without retaliation. Tino wondered if the wolf was ensuring they didn't get past it into the corridor, or if the wolves were trying to wear her out before making their move. Either way, the wolf knights were frighteningly thorough, despite their obvious advantage. Tino's entire body felt like it was on fire. She knew she couldn't hold up her dodging much longer. The more time passed, the worse their predicament became, but what could they do? She desperately racked her brain for answers.
Run! Tino, we'll hold them off.
That's our only option. Damn it, it's just my luck.
At times, hunters were faced with impossible choices. Sometimes, sacrificing friends was the only way to survive.
Run for it, Tino. Ruda, do whatever it takes to escape. You gotta tell the association what's happening down here.
No.
Go, before we're all toast. Hey, don't sweat it. Happens all the time. Today it's our turn. It's just tough luck, that's all. Guess I should have trained a little harder.
The Wolf Knights, as if they understood human conversation, sprang into action. The bow and gun were raised, aimed at the party. Every shot had the ability to snipe a life away. Was that the only way? Had her master not expected this? As Tino became lost in those whirling thoughts, the sounds of battle grew distant. Grieving Souls was one of those rare parties that had never lost a member. That was one of the many reasons Tino worshipped them. Would the same Krai that had kept his entire party alive all these years force such a cruel ultimatum on Tino? No. She knew that many hunters were forced to make those choices, but that wasn't the case today. She returned to the world. The wolf's greatsword carved a line into the ground beside her. A pair of crimson eyes gleamed with irritation. At that moment, Tino heard her dear master in her mind. It's nothing special, but it's all yours. Krai had said those words when she had proudly displayed the ring she'd taken from Gilbert at the recruitment event. Then it clicked. That was it. She knew what to do. Tino glanced at her left hand. She would go for the Wolf Knight's eyes. Even the wolves' thick hide and armor left their eyes unguarded. Attacking the eyes of a powerful monster or phantom was pretty standard. She only hadn't considered it until now because she'd thought she had no means of doing so. The Wolf Knights were more than twice Tino's height. She could neither safely reach their eyes nor attack long range, but now, a glimmer of gold shone on her left ring finger. It was the shooting ring her master had given her. While Tino owned no relic of her own, she had acquired enough knowledge of them through her conversations with Krai. Shooting rings were an unpopular relic, only because of how weak their magic bullets were. They certainly weren't powerful enough to take out a Wolf Knight. Tino retreated back to avoid the swipe of the greatsword as she moved the ring from her left ring finger to her right forefinger. She could feel that the ring was charged. Normally, learning to use a relic took grueling training. Even a shooting ring wasn't so easy to wield for a person without experience. Tino, however, had once practiced using one at a relic shop she had accompanied her master to upon his recommendation. The situation almost seemed orchestrated. Tino simply had to will it to fire.
Hey, Tino.
We aim for the eyes?
Firing a shooting ring required much less movement than firing an arrow or a gun, let alone throwing a dagger. Even if the shooting ring couldn't take out a wolf, if she could blind one, they had a chance of making it into the corridor. Of course, the wolves wouldn't let them pass without a fight. The whole party needed to work together.
I'll do it. Back me up.
Although there was no verbal response, Tino was in sync with her party. Gilbert and Greg dashed to either side of the clubbed wolf, alarming it. This plan was more precarious than the one before. Tino would not get a second shot. Still dodging the greatsword attacks purely on practiced reflex, she turned her attention to the club-wielding wolf, which stood outside of her field of vision. Once she had him in her sights, she controlled her breathing and concentrated. She couldn't miss. Gilbert swung his greatsword, roaring as he attacked. Greg swung at the Wolf Knight as it moved to counter. In the same instant, Ruda took a breath and released her dagger. It spun towards the wolf's eye. The club-wielding Wolf Knight didn't so much as block the dagger. It merely closed its eyes. As the dagger bounced off the wolf's eyelids and fell to the ground, Ruda watched the wolf's muzzle twist in derision. When the wolf opened its eyes, it caught sight of the ball of blue light inches from it. The Wolf Knight froze, unable to react to the perfectly timed projectile. The magic bullet pierced the wolf's eye. By the time the club hit the ground, the party was sprinting for the exit. Tino dove past the greatsword. Ruda and Greg made a run for it. Then Tino saw her remaining party member.
Gilbert, no!
Was Gilbert acting on instinct? Did he see this as an opportunity? Or had Tino been too short-worded with her order? In any case, Gilbert wasn't running for the tunnel. He had swung his sword at the blinded wolf. Tino's cry drained Gilbert of all expression. There was no way to stop his sword now that it was swinging upward to slice the wolf in half. With its arm, the wolf parried the blade. A clash of metal echoed in the room, leaving the wolf's wrist guard greatly dented but unpenetrated. In a rage, the wolf snapped out of its stasis. It flailed its arms blindly, striking Greg and sending him across the room. There was no longer an opening. The beast rose to its feet. With its crimson eyes, it glowered at Tino. completely unaffected by the magic bullet. It was no use. The same tactic wouldn't work twice. Tino faltered, dodging the greatsword out of reflex by diving to one side. She was all out of stamina. With a little bit of respite, she could recover, but the wolves wouldn't be so courteous.
I'm sorry.
Tino didn't blame him, though. Their position would have greatly improved if he had succeeded, and she hadn't been explicit enough in her instruction. It could have gone either way. As the wolf reached for its club, Gilbert slashed the creature as if to make up for his mistake, as if to offer the rest of the party a chance to escape. Greg rose to his feet and joined the attack. Sensing a desperate final stand from the humans, the Wolf Knights howled. Now they knew what the party was after. Bow and gun were pointed at the entrance to the tunnel. Even if they made it inside, they likely wouldn't survive the volley. They were finally cornered with no schemes left up their sleeve and almost no stamina and mental fortitude left to fight. What were their chances of escaping alive? How likely was it for them to take out all 4 phantoms here and now? Both options seemed hopeless, yet Tino wondered which she should choose. She met Ruta's eyes. The newbie thief's once cheerful face was now marred with her weariness. Everyone in the party, including Tino, was on the brink of collapse as they faced these enemies more fearsome than anything they'd faced before, with close to no chance of escape. Tino recalled her mentor's teaching. What should she do? Her heart thumped as the words came to her without her effort. Her mentor had repeated them many times. Kill or get killed.
I can't, Lizzie.
Tino whimpered in defeat as she realized the fruitlessness of her mentor's advice. At that moment, as if on cue, something mowed down one of the Wolf Knights. I've got it, Krai. You just need an arsenal of powerful relics. Luke, all the gear in the world won't save me if I don't have the talent to use them. A conversation I'd once had with Luke was replaying in my mind. At the speed I was flying, even a hunter hardened with mana material wouldn't have survived a crash. In my heart of hearts, I knew I was a dead man. I'm gonna die, damn it! The White Wolf's den was much larger than I'd expected any monster den to be, but the passages were far too narrow for me to fly around with the unstoppable night hiker. The regular placement of the luminous stones was enough to light my way through the dark cave, enhanced by the Owl's Eye, a relic that granted night vision on my right thumb. It was a silver lining, but a thin one against the towering storm cloud I faced. I would come rushing towards a wall every few seconds, forcing me to turn by yanking on my coat. This dark and gloomy cavern was a place I never would have set foot in under normal circumstances. Now, the only thought on my mind was how to stop myself from moving. I'd brought a map of the vault with me, but by this point, I had no idea where I was. There was no tight steering when it came to the night hiker, so the whole way I was being slammed against the wall, ceiling, and ground. My vision shook. I felt like a rubber ball, barely aware of where I was going. My face was rigid with effort. In hindsight, I should have done everything in my power to stop before entering the vault. I'd let the rush of high-speed flight get to me, and now I was gonna barf with only myself to blame. I whipped past a giant phantom blocking most of the corridor. There was little wonder how the phantom couldn't catch me, when I barely knew my trajectory. By the time the thing noticed me, I was whizzing over its head, telling myself that I was certainly not flying over a bipedal wolf. Where is Tino? Unlike phantoms, hunters left behind corpses when they died. Even if Tino's party had lost, there was no chance the phantoms had lapped up every bone and drop of blood of their frail human bodies. That's what I thought anyway. At the very least, my piss-poor vision didn't spot any corpses that might have belonged to Tino and her merry gang. It was unlikely that they had met their ends. If Tino and company hadn't left the capital at all, I would have been a complete laughingstock. Tino had a strong moral compass, unlike me, so I didn't expect her to ditch the quest altogether. But being Liz's apprentice, she did have a manipulative side. There was a chance that my head smacked against the ceiling, hard but painlessly, making me see stars. The wolf-like phantom at the end of the straight corridor spotted the incoming human missile and stared wide-eyed. In an instant, I shot past it. Along the way, my shoulder bashed the side of its head, sending me hurtling into the opposite wall. Though I was temporarily shaken, I still somehow managed to make the tight curve ahead, scraping along the cave wall. That I hadn't already splattered against a wall along the way was pretty much a miracle. Well, using a separate relic to help me steer did help a bit. Thank goodness for relics. My luck wouldn't last forever, though. If I didn't find a way to land soon, I'd be as dead as a doornail. Then I'd be remembered for all eternity as the dumbass who crash-landed in a treasure vault, like a human missile incident part 2. I couldn't bear the thought. Not even I deserved an ending that pathetic. No, my mind was made up. I'd have to stop some way somehow. Before I knew it, the corridor had widened around me, as I rapidly approached the back of an enormous phantom. With my life on the line, I made the critical decision to make that phantom my landing pad. All I had to do was commit. I hugged my head, closed my eyes, and prayed for my life. I came to, and the twinkling in my eyes slowly faded as I recovered from the collision. It looked like I'd survived the landing. Lowering my arms from my head, I realized that I was already standing. Despite the knockout impact, I'd somehow escaped without a scratch except that my equilibrium was out of whack. I nearly barfed trying to adjust to solid ground, but I somehow held it in. I shook my head to keep myself from blacking out again. Even after avoiding the front lines like the plague for years, I hadn't forgotten that when a hunter lost their consciousness in a vault, they lost their life with it. Dusting off my shoulders, I heaved a heavy sigh. My heart was still hammering a frantic drum solo, threatening to explode in my chest if I didn't calm myself soon. My face was frozen solid, but after seeing my life flash before my eyes, I took my mild symptoms as a win. The night hiker was a defective relic and a deadly one, at that. The inventor must have had as many screws loose in their head as my friends did in theirs. How was breaking not the first thing on the inventor's mind? The phantom that had unknowingly volunteered to be my landing pad had impaled the cave wall, head first. Apparently, there hadn't only been one phantom there though, but two. The pair of them were in a heap, completely immobile. No level 3 phantom could have survived a human missile to the back. Its thick black armor was dented and cracked. By the wall lay a giant bow and sword that must have belonged to the mysterious phantoms. I say mysterious because these phantoms were of a completely different shape, size, and color than the ones I had expected. The phantoms in this vault were supposed to be ordinary wolves, but the ones piled on the ground were clad in steadfast armor rivaling that of high-ranking knights. That sure was a surprise, and not the fun kind. Back in the day, when I'd been dragged against my will into a level 3 vault, the phantoms had seemed significantly weaker than these. Then again, maybe things had changed in the years I'd thrown in the towel. It was also possible that these phantoms only looked deadly, but I was ready to barf anyway. At last, I decided to take in my surroundings as they became clearer. During my crash landing, I hadn't had time to take in that I was standing in a chamber more spacious than the passage. The ceiling was extraordinarily high for a cave in an underground den, and the walls and floor were extraordinarily smooth to have been dug out by wolves. The space would have been quite the sight if it weren't for the lack of windows and light, and if we did away with the phantoms. Then I spotted a familiar face framed by ruffled black hair, the pale face of a girl who wasn't visibly injured but looked disheveled compared to how she'd looked when I'd pawned off the quest on her. Tino was standing there, having survived the miserable mission I had unknowingly thrust into her charge. She and the rest of her party were staring at me, bewildered and out of breath. Most importantly, all of them were alive.
Master?
There you are, Tino. Score! Wait a minute, there you are? Out of my confusion, I was acting nonchalantly, but my actions definitely called for a proper apology. Even though Tino seemed unharmed, all color had drained from her expression. She seemed more weary than I'd ever seen her. Taking on this level 3 vault had clearly taken a great toll on her. The time had finally come for me to premiere my signature move, my spectacular knack for groveling. I could only laugh at this point. As I stood there grinning, Gilbert snapped me out of my thoughts.
Turn around, old man. Behind you.
What? Old man? The fact that I wanted to tell Lil Gilbert to watch his mouth was a testament to how long I'd gone without seeing combat. No respectable hunter would let his guard down in a treasure vault. I leisurely spun around like a brain-dead fool to find a colossal phantom identical to the one that had cushioned my crash. My cowardly instincts immediately kicked in, making me hug the wall. Upon closer inspection of the scene, another phantom, holding a ridiculously large club, stood over Lil Gilbert. Accounting for the pair that was still on the ground, that brought the total of these enormous phantoms to 4. Now that I wasn't actively crashing into one of them, I could see that the phantoms had wolf heads, the right half of which was covered by a human skull. Their blood-red eyes gleamed in the dim light, eyeing the unmannerly intruder. The wolves' shoulders rose and fell in time to heavy breaths, and viscous drool dripped off of their muzzles. If I'd still been an active hunter, I would have fallen to my knees and barfed my guts out at the mere look of those eyes. However, since I'd been so long detached from the dangers of hunting, another thought occupied my mind. Do level 3 phantoms really get this big nowadays? Times have changed. I can't imagine what sort of nightmare fuel spawns in level 8 vaults. Good thing I stopped putting my ass on the line. Past me sure was brilliant, like he was a genius strategist or something. The wolf with the massive gun growled at my smirking mug and took a step back. Then the phantom with the club that had been looming over Lil Gilbert shifted to protect its comrade. They were sniffing the air and eyeing me cautiously. My grinning faded as reality finally set in. I was more than likely seconds away from meeting my maker. For whatever reason, the wolves hadn't attacked me yet, but I didn't stand a chance against phantoms that had put Tino in such a miserable state. I mean, what the hell was I gonna do? As I frantically searched my brain for any chance of weaseling my way out of this, the great Greg piped up in terror.
That can't be. The bosses. They're scared.
Come again? Scared? How ridiculous. If they were wolves, I was a sheep, a lamb ready for the slaughter. Most of the mana material I'd once built up had fizzled out of me, and the only thing this little lamb had going for it was its hunter level stamped on paper. I was just standing there, unsure what was going on, and yet the wolf knights took another step back. Their noses were twitching furiously as their eyes were glued on me. What were they so afraid of? The great Greg had to be way more intimidating. Following the wolves' gazes, I finally noticed what they were looking at. Those crimson eyes weren't pointed at my face, but at the metallic capsule dangling from my neck, the capsule that contained Citri's slime. I took one step forward. The wolf knights took one step back. Their eyes were frozen in my direction, but they weren't looking at me. What the hell's inside to make them so scared? I wondered, what in the world was I wearing around my neck? I took another step forward, and the beasts took another 2 steps back. They were convinced this sheep was poisonous. My luck had turned. Apparently, I wasn't gonna die down there after all. Without taking my eyes off the wolf knights, I called behind me. Can you run, Tino? Under my cool exterior, my heart was violently beating against my chest.
Yes. Yes, of course.
Tino replied, breaking free from her trance. 3 passages led out of the chamber, one of which was blocked by the wolves before me. We had no chance of making it past both of them at once. No matter how frightened they were, there was no guarantee that the wolves wouldn't soon conclude the poison vial around my neck was worth the risk. The best move was to retreat, for now, and get Tino and her party to rest up before breaking out of this place together. That way. I pointed to the passage to the right, which was the closest one to us. Now that the wolf with the club had stepped aside, the route was free for our taking.
Master, shouldn't we defeat them?
Of course, Tino, I wanted to say, we totally should take them down. But how the hell do you expect me to do that? I could have thrown the slime capsule at them and prayed they died, but betting our lives on a slime I had no knowledge about was far too risky. Since the thing was a good enough deterrent in the capsule, I would keep taking advantage of that fact. I sighed and adopted a wise tone. Don't lose sight of what's important, Tino.
Oh, you mean... you mean...
That's right. The most important thing was her life. Battles of life or death were stupid. More power to those who risked their lives like that, but count me out. Just then, I heard movement from somewhere. Tino gasped. Before I knew it, all I could see was pitch-black armor towering over me. One of the wolf knights had recovered from my crash landing and leapt up to me. By the time I realized what had happened, a sword longer than I was tall came rushing down. My senses were overwhelmed by the wrathful howl and beastly stench. I simply stood there, frozen, unable to move a muscle. The sword came down like a guillotine, heavy and fast enough to split me clean in 2 before striking me and bouncing off me without leaving a mark.
What the for?
The wolf knight that had attacked me stared in surprise. It stumbled back a few steps and inspected the greatsword in its hands, apparently too surprised to burn in hate. A powerful arrow was loosed with what sounded like cannon fire, to strike me on the forehead and be deflected in the same way. Apparently, both of the phantoms I'd crashed into were very much alive, and very pissed. I would be too if some bozo had tackled me from behind and knocked me into a wall. All 4 wolf knights glared down at me. I forced a smile. Hey, what else could I have done? I was as good as dead. But then I finally thought of a way to fight back. I stuck out my index finger, pointed it at the wolves like a gun, and activated the shock shooting ring on my left pinky. A ball of blue light burned at my fingertip, forming a magic bullet. Just before firing the bullet, I cracked a badass one-liner. Nice try, but I've got 17 lives. Humans were weak. Physically speaking, we were like the frailest creatures our size. The human body wasn't built to survive harsh treasure vaults and fight the monsters and phantoms within them. Therefore, to make a living as a hunter, humans must be endowed with some kind of natural talent. The treasure hunting industry boasted an abundance of natural talent. Chief among these talents was the possession of a high rate of mana material intake. Hence, there was never an overabundance of hunters, even in our day and age, when treasure hunters were worshipped by the public. Unfortunately for me, I had only realized that after becoming a hunter. The silver lining was that all of my friends made up for the raw natural talent I lacked. They were talented enough to blow through most treasure vaults without my help. The wealth and reputation that our party had accumulated made me suck a little less as a hunter. That is, thanks to those spoils, I had survived this long without any talent, guts, motivation, goals, hope, or luck. Safety rings, like shooting rings, were well-known ring-type relics. When its wearer was attacked, a safety ring automatically deployed a barrier of a set strength for a set amount of time. Long story short, each of them protected the wearer from an attack, one time only. The strength and duration of the barrier depended on the ring. The stronger and longer lasting the barrier was, the rarer and more expensive the ring. Since I wanted to avoid dying at all cost, I had, for a small fortune worth enough to buy the clan HQ several times, overbought every single safety ring on the market. As a result, I had a whopping 17 rings on me. I doubted that anyone else in the capital wore anything close to that number of safety rings. Normally, they could only be found on the fingers of top-tier hunters who wore them in case of emergencies. Naturally, I only had 10 fingers, but they worked just as well in my pouch. Heck, without them, I would have never so much as touched the night hiker. Safety rings weren't infallible, of course. The barrier they produced only lasted for a second at most, usually for a fraction of that. A single activation drained every drop of a ring's mana, reducing the relic to an ordinary hunk of jewelry. Since my own rings had protected me along the way from being splattered against the cave walls, I was sure I'd be squashed flat after a few wolf night clobberings. Ergo, I'd have to get out of there at all costs before that happened. My having 17 lives had been a teensy bit of an exaggeration. The wolf knight with the greatsword reacted swiftly to the magic bullet, ducking just enough so it whizzed above its head. It was as though it had seen the bullet coming. That didn't sit right with me.
It dodged it!
Then, the blue light doubled back on its trajectory, striking the wolf in the back of its head. As the phantom was knocked to the ground, the cave shook from the sound of the impact. That had definitely taken the other wolves by surprise. Keeping my eyes on the pack, I shouted, "Run, Tino!"
Oh, okay.
Tino burst into a sprint, followed by the rest of her party. The wolf knights kept their full attention on me, choosing not to hound the others. A shooting ring was any ring relic that fired magic bullets. The shock shooting ring, for example, could, at max, charge fire up to 7 bullets that would explode upon impact. However, although the explosion looked flashy, that was pretty much all it did. In fact, it inflicted little to no damage at all. The wolf knight on the ground was probably just dazed from the surprise attack. There was a great variety of shooting rings out there, but none of them were powerful enough to take out a phantom. At best, they could be used to make a diversion. The prone wolf pushed itself up. As expected, the magic bullet hadn't left a scratch. The wolves shifted to form a semicircle around me, 2 in the front and 2 in the back, which was a pretty orderly move for level 3 wolves. I watched them rearrange themselves and scowled at the gun-bearing wolf, which I had blissfully been ignoring up to this point. That thing was no joke. My bag of safety rings wouldn't do squat against rapid fire. The wolves' fear of Citri's slime had been overcome by their rage. Their eyes now glowed with 1 part fear, 3 parts rage, 3 parts hatred, and 3 parts wariness, if I had to throw some numbers around. First and foremost, I had to buy Tino enough time to get away. Once I was alone against the wolves, I could fly away if I had to. Thinking that flashing a weapon should keep them at bay a little longer, I maintained my stupid grin and reached for the sword relic on my back. But it wasn't there. I kept reaching for the sword but only found my crossbow relic. Never miss a shot 9000. The crossbow allowed me to control the trajectory of any flying object I shot, including me wearing the night hiker and the magic bullet I just fired. It's worth noting that I'd named the relic myself, and it didn't actually have the accuracy to guarantee the object it controlled would hit its target. Don't tell me I dropped it. I had a sheath strapped to my back, but it held no sword. I replayed my journey to this point, but I couldn't even recall when I'd lost it, since I'd been so frantically trying to minimize my crashes against the cave walls. It was an expensive relic too, not that it possessed any ability that would get me out of this pickle. At least the wolf knights were staying where they were, wary of my incoherent movements.
Master, what are you doing?
Tino, whom I thought was running for her life, was watching me from the corridor. The rest of her party were standing beside her, apparently waiting for me. What part of run was so hard for them to get through their skulls? What was I doing? That's what I wanted to know. Dropping a relic in a treasure vault was beyond unlucky, it was moronic. I was no badass, just a total dumbass. One of the phantoms, both hands on its club, howled as if to drown out its fear and approached me. Red alert! The relic on my right pinky grew hot to signify the impending threat. Yeah, as if I could dodge it. The club that would have smashed me paper thin bounced off another barrier. This was bad. I was more hopeless than I'd thought. I couldn't get myself to move. Even though I knew a safety ring would protect me, I was terrified. The phantoms cowered at the human standing unaffected by the colossal blow. I, too, was cowering, but on the inside. My loyal hounding chain rattled on my belt as it sensed my mortal peril. The chain was valuable enough to bring me to tears if it were to break. But desperate times called for desperate measures. Hopefully, the chain would hold off the wolves long enough. I clicked it off of my belt. The freshly recharged chain sprang up and slithered towards the wolf knight with the club. It wasn't strong enough to take a wolf knight down, but it proved a serious nuisance to the hulking phantom. The chain wrapped itself around the wolf's legs and toppled it. The other 3 wolves cautiously kept their distance, apparently never having dealt with a chain like this. Of course, the thing scared them. It had scared me the first time I'd seen it in action, but the hounding chain couldn't hold them all off. That bow and that gun scared the crap out of me. Why was the world full of darkness and terror? I couldn't help but wonder if the wolves would chase me if I simply ran out of there. The wolf knights were very wary of me. Well, they were wary of the slime around my neck at least. Nevertheless, their eyes burned with anger that threatened to overtake them. All I wanted to do was run. I no longer cared about the hunters we were supposed to rescue. I wanted to go home. Cursing my luck, I held out both palms and activated my shooting rings. Ring relics themselves were relatively well known, but not many people knew that there were 2 types. Ones that only worked when put on a finger and ones that worked as long as the user carried them in some way. Shooting rings were in the latter category. Lil Gilbert watched in awe as countless bullets of light floated above my hands. I had activated all the shooting rings stuffed in the pouch on my belt. Ring relics were very light, and shooting rings were cheap by relic standards, so anyone with a little money and time could pull off something like this. The type of shooting ring determined the color of its bullet, so a kaleidoscope of color was refracting in the palm of my hands. It was very eye-catching, if I do say so myself, but it was also very weak. The wolf knights stirred, wary that I was about to launch another attack, but it was no use. They'd have no chance of dodging all of these bullets. While ordinary shooting rings only fired in a straight line, I had never missed a shot 9,000 with me. The spheres floated up, and as per my input, assaulted the wolves from all directions. The wolves tried to dodge out of the way, but I manipulated the projectiles and chased the wolves down. I didn't even give them a chance to reach for their weapons. Figuring that they couldn't outmaneuver the bullets, or thinking that the spell tracked them automatically, the wolves dove to the ground and curled up like turtles. Without mercy, I cast down the magical volley onto their backs.
Wow!
Ruda seemed to share his sentiment.
So this is what a level 8 can do?
Tino watched with admiration in her eyes. I wasn't going to turn down any compliments. I wouldn't have turned down any monetary tips for my performance either, but I would settle for them finally running away like I told them to. Magic rained down on the phantoms, striking their heads, arms, shoulders, eyes, and even the skulls they wore like half masks. The array of bullets burned, froze, sparked, and burst upon impact. Every one of the shooting rings I'd brought was unique, each of them producing a different kind of magic. Once all the magical bullets had exploded, darkness returned. My strategy, as flashy and impressive as it had looked, had one crippling downside. It sucked. As the party watched with bated breath, the wolf knights rose from their protective positions. There wasn't a scratch on any of them.
After all of that?
The phantoms snarled as if curious. Hey, I couldn't help it. Most relics weren't designed to kill. Weapon relics were another story. Most of those relied on their wielder's skill to be effective. In the hands of someone like me who had no talent as a fighter whatsoever, they were completely useless. Once the phantoms had all risen to their feet and made sure they were unharmed, they shot me a collective glare for unleashing that joke of an attack. I guess it didn't work after all. Some of the rings did pack an effect that temporarily paralyzed their target or put them to sleep, but I guess those effects were negated. To the best of my knowledge, shooting rings had originally been designed to be used against humans, anyway. No wonder they hadn't done much against the wolf knights. Now I was out of all cards but one. It was time to buck up. The wolves would win if the battle was drawn out much longer. Oh well, I didn't really want to use this today, but screw it. I took off the finger-sized capsule from around my neck. The wolf knights went wide-eyed and took a few steps back. I knew they were afraid of the capsule, not me. If I was going to die, I might as well take those damn wolves with me. I was a dead man anyway. At least this way, I'd take those damn wolves with me, in the cataclysm of Cetri's slime, which was supposedly some sort of wacky slime engineered by my friend Cetri. I didn't know much about the thing, and I didn't want to know. Trembling from trepidation, I popped off the cap and carefully peeked into the capsule. Then I rubbed my eyes and checked again. Frowning, I shakily stuck my finger inside. Tino and the others were watching me with growing concern. With nothing left to lose, I gave one big nod, replaced the cap, and then lobbed the capsule at the wolves, firing a magic bullet at it. The wolves quickly scattered, terrified of the incoming projectile. As soon as I made sure the bullet I controlled was flying towards the capsule, I darted in Tino's direction. Hurry, Tino! Tino and her party snapped out of it and sprinted into the passage. The capsule exploded behind me. The wolves howled in agitation, but there was no time to look back. We had to make it out of there before the phantoms realized the capsule was completely empty. Where did the contents go, anyway? I shuddered at the thought. I channeled every drop of my strength into controlling my breathing and moving my legs. It had been a while since I'd last sprinted like that, and I couldn't afford to turn around. We dashed through the dark and narrow tunnels, the cold air brushing my cheeks. The great Greg, Lil Gilbert, Ruta, and Tino ran a few paces in front of me. Despite going as fast as I could, I wasn't catching up to them, which meant they were pacing themselves so I could keep up. Lil Gilbert turned around, sprinting with that great sword of his as though it were nothing. Although he was frowning, he looked much more at ease than he had when I had arrived. Was he recuperating while we ran? What a freak!
They'll catch up to us at this rate. We need to go faster.
You idiot! Krai's minding Tino's injury!
I didn't realize. I'm sorry.
Wait, Tino's hurt? And I can still barely keep up with her. Come on, I wasn't that slow of a runner. Comparing me to Tino of all people was simply unfair. Maybe I had subconsciously been going slower for Tino's benefit. No one could prove otherwise. Ruta's comment stung a little, but it did bring me back to my senses. Making sure there was no scary howling coming from behind us, I stopped. While I didn't have the skill set of a thief, I was sure Tino would have said something if we were still being chased. It looked like we'd lost them. The others took my pause as their cue to stop with me. They must have bonded during their quest because they were much more agreeable now.
Are we good?
I guess we lost them. That was close. You really saved our hides back there.
I didn't deserve his thanks, really. I deserved to beg for their forgiveness. For now, though, we had to get ourselves together. Holding in projectile vomit, I steadied my breathing and turned to Tino. Tino clutched her own shoulders and shrunk back.
Master,
Krai, Tino really gave it her all.
She sounded apologetic for some reason. Right. If only an apology could fix everything. No one had to tell me that Tino was pushed to her very limit. I could see it, as clear as day. Her usually immaculate hair was disheveled, and there was no color left in her face. Her black shorts were torn, revealing much of the fair skin on her right thigh, which drew my attention to The sight sure was alluring. Tino noticed my glance and pulled the right leg of her shorts up as far as it could go. What was she doing? This hardly seemed like the right place to give me a peep of her panties. She was looking away as if embarrassed, her lips tightly sealed. I kept staring at her until Lil Gilbert broke the silence.
You can heal people, 1,000 tricks?
Oh, so that's where she's hurt. Tino really needs to work on her communication. I just thought she was up to her usual tricks. The whole reason we'd stopped was so I could heal Tino up. I examined the pale thigh she was proudly presenting to me. I didn't see any wound or scar, but I wasn't going to deny that she was badly hurt, seeing how she could barely run faster than me. Naturally, I had brought my healing relics with me. How could I have not? I took the silver cross or relic called Healing Faith from about my neck and held it up to Tino's thigh. A blue light emanated from the cross and faded into her leg. She relaxed, ever so slightly. Sorry I didn't realize sooner, Tino.
thanks, Master. It doesn't hurt anymore.
Well, Tino would have to carry my weight for years to come. Having watched the healing process, Lil Gilbert sighed in relief.
Oh, it's just a healing relic.
Just a healing relic? So what? Did this ingrate have a problem with me relying on relics for absolutely everything? If we'd been anywhere but inside a treasure vault, I would have stormed off back to the clan house.
Krai, did you take out those wolf knights?
Let This Grieving Soul Retire by Tsuka Cage, cast by Art Tale Studio. If you are interested in creating your own audiobooks, please check out our website at ourtale.ai. Now, enjoy the story. If I had to give him an answer, it would be not a chance. Wolves had a keen sense of smell. Those wolf knights must have feared the smell left on the capsule. I had no idea if slimes had an odor to them, but I couldn't think of another explanation. By now, those dogs must be mad as hell. They'd been deceived by an empty capsule and let their prey escape from beneath their noses. The only thing we had to focus on now was getting out of here. Even those dreadful phantoms shouldn't be able to follow us out of the vault. Besides, the rescue mission was toast. There's no way those hunters had survived all this time. We wouldn't be doing anyone any favors by getting ourselves killed trying to save them. I let out a long sigh and stretched. Having lost my sword was a terrible shame, but one measly relic certainly wasn't worth me risking my life for. Since it was doubtful that the hounding chain would return to me on its own, I'd simply have someone fetch it for me later. I didn't, but that was the best course of action for us back there. That's not what we need to focus on. Let's keep walking.
Yeah, you got it.
2 questions remained. Where were we, and where was the exit? We walked on in silence with me in the lead. There was no chit-chat this time, since everyone was so exhausted. As per the map I'd seen beforehand, the White Wolf's den was like an anthill, with tight passages crisscrossing throughout. In other words, everything looked the same. While the den wasn't too expansive of a vault, it was entirely possible we were retracing the same set of passages over and over. Why am I leading the march, anyway? Isn't this thief work? This party has 2 for crying out loud. I had tried stopping for a bit to let Tino or Ruta take the lead, only for them to dutifully stop a pace behind me. I thought Tino was more of a go-getter than this. Each time I looked at her, she turned away like she was sick of me, like she never wanted to speak to me again, like she wanted me dead. I never thought I'd see the day when Tino despised me. Maybe I should have begged for forgiveness when I'd had the chance. We were still in a dangerous treasure vault, though. Checkmate, it felt like. I had no choice but to blindly carry on. Here and there I decided to turn on a whim. The only silver lining was that we didn't encounter any enemies along the way. Maybe this vault wasn't so densely populated after all. Or, more likely, Tino was subtly guiding us away from any enemies. We heard the occasional howl echoing through the labyrinthian den, but those howls were always distant. At least I thought they were distant. I hoped they were. We had been walking for a while, but there was still no sign of the exit. I was pretty sure we were at least headed in the right general direction, but this was why I hated cave-type vaults. Just as I was considering if the time was right for me to grovel on my hands and knees for Tino to forgive me, Lil Gilbert spoke up.
Hey, I'm sorry if you're not telling us on purpose or something, but where are we headed? The exit?
He had grown wonderfully sheepish over the course of the day. Unfortunately, I had no clue. The exit was our target destination, at least. As I was about to say as much, Tino hurriedly piped up.
Gilbert, interpreting our master's intentions is part of the training, and we're not headed to the exit. The passage we took out of the boss room has no outlet. We need to pass through the boss room again to leave here.
Really? We're still training?
Really? I couldn't help but internally mirror Lil Gilbert's response. I was totally heading for the exit. At least, I was trying to head that way, but apparently I took the wrong tunnel. Wait, that was the boss room? No wonder those phantoms looked loads stronger than expected. So, now what? Does this mean we have to go all the way back? And Tino was training in this situation? Where else would I possibly try to take us except the exit? This is why I'm so sick of people who are too hard on themselves.
But, Krai, can't you at least tell us where we're headed?
I felt pathetic. Where was I headed? I was always lost, not just in this treasure vault, but in life, in general. There were no landmarks whatsoever, so there was no telling what was what, even though the party was acting for some reason like I was their guide. First chance I get, I'm gonna make a casual U-turn. Those wolf knights will be long gone by the time we make it back to the boss room. If only I could make a U-turn in my life. I held back my tears and put on a stern expression. I made a turn. One more turn in the same direction would pretty much make a U-turn, but would it really be safe to return to the boss room? We marched for several minutes. Just as I was thinking about making that second turn, the Great Greg gasped. I turned to find him looking at me like I was some sort of freak.
It can't be. There was no trail. He wasn't even looking. How?
I told you, Master always does things for a reason.
Say that you too! We have to help them!
Finally, I spotted several silhouettes collapsed up ahead, too small to belong to phantoms. After staring at them for a few moments, I noticed they were moving a little. What? Did the great Greg spot them from all the way over here? These guys sure have great eyesight. I might have even turned down another passage without seeing them. Are those the lost hunters we're here for? I wondered. I really hadn't expected them to be alive. Lucky ducks. Maybe their good fortune would rub off on me.
See? I told you it's all according to plan.
No. This is obviously a coincidence. I couldn't see the future, not even with the help of all of my relics combined.
Why would you say that when you brought us here?
We approached the hunters we'd been tasked to save. The one closest to us was a man larger than even the great Greg. He wore a full set of dull gray armor and had a large green shield on his back. Within arm's reach lay an enormous conical lance that would have never been used in human warfare. Its distinct glow indicated that it was a relic. The man was Rudolf de Boot. Before receiving the request, I'd not heard the name before, but his well-built frame was becoming of his level 5 rank. Tino and the great Greg clearly knew him, solidifying the fact that they had taken on this quest despite knowing that a level 5 hunter had become stranded. What weirdos! Rudolf apparently had a broken bone, because Tino and the gang rushed over and took off his armor before making him drink a potion. I wouldn't have even known what to untie to get the armor off of him. The other members of the lost party were lying nearby, completely worn out. Some of them seemed badly hurt, but at least they were all alive. It was miraculous that they hadn't been finished off lying this deep in a treasure vault.
How's the pain?
Rudolf wheezed. His cheeks were sunken, but his eyes burned with a faint but unmistakable flicker of life.
I'm all right. Thanks. You saved us.
Master is the one you should thank.
I haven't done anything. There was no arguing that I'd been as useless as ever. The only thing I could have been credited for was sending in Tino and company, which, on second thought, deserved thanks, didn't it? With wavering eyes, Rudolf looked at me. He was completely out of stamina after being trapped for 3 days in this hole. For whatever it was worth, I handed him a chocolate bar I always carried around as a snack. Rudolf scarfed it down. Do you have food?
Outside?
So is our food, Master. We plan to camp outside of the vault.
Ah, gotcha. We always camped inside. My friends had a funny habit of seeing dangerous treasure vaults as convenient training grounds. Once we'd settled down, I reassessed the situation. Some of Rudolph's party members were unconscious, but we poured a potion down their throats so they wouldn't die on us just yet. Now that we knew all of them were alive, another problem dawned on us. Their survival was good news to the association, for sure, but it also meant a lot of work for us, the rescuers. Carrying 5 injured hunters would be a grueling task, especially through a vault with those scary phantoms. We wouldn't exactly be breezing out of here. The level 5 Rudolph was surely a trusty ally under normal circumstances, but I couldn't expect him to take on those phantoms after being stranded for 3 days with hardly any food or drink. Besides, they were in this situation because they couldn't defeat those phantoms in the first place. Could Rudolph even move in his full armor? I certainly couldn't carry it, or even his lance. If I still had my sword relic, it would be a different story. Rudolph would probably have to leave his armor behind. Besides, the phantoms could spot us any minute. Time was of the essence. Rudolph might have been a lucky guy, but I was tremendously unlucky. Peering into Rudolph's eyes as he seemed to hang on the brink of unconsciousness, Tino asked.
What happened? You were level 5. You should have been able to hold your own here.
She was right. Level 5 hunters were top tier. Rudolph didn't look like he had accumulated unearned levels like I had, and he hadn't even taken on the vault alone. Rudolph bit his lip, his widened eyes alone conveying the terror he'd faced.
There's something bad down here, something far, far worse than level 3. We didn't underestimate it, but we couldn't. Nothing worked. My lance, his maneuvers.
Yeah, we know. Some wolf knight with half of its muzzle covered with a human skull.
Rudolph grew even more astonished and began shaking his head. He was pale in the face, his stricken eyes wide as if the fearsome enemy still loomed before him.
Half? No. The one that got us had its whole face covered with a skull. We need to get out.
Tino's expression hardened as she looked at me. What? This isn't my fault. Still, knowing that there was a phantom even stronger than the ones we'd faced made me want to write an angry letter. What was going on in this treasure vault? Sure, I was unlucky, but there had to be a limit, right? There was no way we'd be so unfortunate as to run into this phantom. I wanted to laugh it off, but for some reason I just wasn't in the mood.
Master, You're the light in the darkness.
Tino was overcome with emotion as she watched her adoring master take out chocolate bar after chocolate bar from his small leather pack and hand them to their companions. She was sure that out of all the hunters in the capital, no other surpassed Krai Andrey. His bravery and kindness were the very qualities that Tino admired about him.
Why you even got all this?
That's classified. Ruta watched him, exasperated.
Don't you have anything but chocolate in there?
Nope. There's plenty to go around, though. He seemed completely unbothered by either comment, continuing to break the tension with every bar he handed out. Tino's mentor, Lizzie, was a freakishly powerful hunter, but there was more to her dear master than strength alone. He was kind for saving Tino at the last minute, when she couldn't handle his trial, and his level-headedness allowed him to prioritize saving the lost hunters, the objective of the quest Tino had neglected by shaving precious minutes in walking away from the phantoms he could have easily finished off. Using tracking skills to rival even those of a thief, he had discovered the lost hunters himself and wasted no time until he'd found them. The fact that they hadn't encountered any phantoms en route suggested that he had sensed their presence, or perhaps the Wolf Knights feared him as much as the boss phantoms had. Most impressively, Krai was willing to sacrifice his pride and play the part of the jester. While many people considered Ark the most powerful hunter of his generation, he couldn't pull off half of the things her master made look so easy. In Tino's eyes, Krai was the epitome of the perfect hunter, someone who was more worthy of the level 10 title than anyone. Of course, there was his troublesome habit of dishing out ruthless trials, but even those were a form of tough love, only given because he expected the same of his prodigies as he did of himself. Case in point, he had swooped in for the rescue when Tino was truly at her wit's end. She wouldn't go so far as to call this a flaw in her master.
What now?
We'll get out of here as soon as we can. We did what we came for. For hunters, fighting and defeating fearsome foes was considered an accolade, but Krai didn't so much as hesitate in his answer. He must have been concerned for the stamina of the rescued hunters. As nourishing as those chocolate bars were, the 6 hunters were far from full strength. Of course, it was also possible that Tino's master considered even those wolf knights beneath him and not worth the effort of defeating. Just watching her master gave Tino strength to keep her exhausted body moving. She couldn't stand to let her hero watch her fail anymore. She had already failed her trial. Even though she'd been overcome with joy when he'd come to her aid, she still wanted to earn his respect, even if she couldn't hold a candle to her master's prowess. Just then, Krai glanced over at Tino. That was all it took to send her heart drumming away. There was a gentle smile on his face. Well, Tino's the leader on this quest. I'll follow her lead.
What? But I'm nothing compared to you.
There were few hunters who could match the brilliant 1,000 tricks who had, from all the way in the capital, detected trouble. Tino shrank back as her master continued. It's all about the experience. I'll give you a hand when you really need it. Now that he'd said that, she couldn't very well defer her decision-making to him. Tino thought about her decision and spoke, glancing at her master for some form of approval.
Like Master said, we should prioritize leaving the vault as quickly as possible.
You're going to lead the way, right? She nodded without a second thought. As any half-decent hunter would have, Tino had memorized the map of the treasure vault before embarking on this quest. In fact, she knew where they were now. There was no getting lost. She wouldn't allow herself to rely on Krai's directions.
Of course, although I may not be able to avoid all of the phantoms like you did.
What? Oh, yeah, right. Try your best to avoid them, though. That's pretty important.
Absolutely, Master. My pain's gone, so I won't hold us back anymore.
Yeah, right, we were going a bit slow earlier, but these people have been stranded here for days. Don't forget that. Tino's cheeks glowed from her embarrassment. She had forgotten about the lost hunters, as she'd been too preoccupied with her master's gaze. She wouldn't let this happen again. Of course, the hunters they were rescuing were pretty capable themselves, so they wouldn't have to slow down as much as they had on their way there. But she didn't see the point in mentioning that now. Her master was making a point. Tino quelled the overwhelming shame she felt. This wasn't the time for it. She also knew full well that Krai could pick 100 things about her that weren't up to his standards yet. She could only show him her best performance as a hunter and leader. Bearing her master's expectant gaze, Tino said,
And just in case, while this may be unnecessary with Master here, it may be best to ask Rudolph about the humanoid wolf knight that attacked him.
The silver wolf knight slowly raised its head as a small silhouette entered without a sound. Under the wolf's foot lay a mangled piece of metal that reeked of a smell it didn't recognize. Still, from the moment the wolf had caught a whiff, instinct had told it to be wary of the thing. Now, however, the bipedal wolf knight, that was at least as smart as the ancient silver moons, knew that the thing was harmless, and that it had been hoodwinked. It also knew, with confidence, that it could tear through every single one of its human foes. The bizarre chain that had stopped the wolves in their tracks was now on the ground, powerless. Even if a similar weapon were to be unleashed against them, the wolf knight knew how to deal with it. The wolf knight lifted the greatsword as long as itself and turned around almost lazily. Behind the half-skull mask it wore, its crimson eyes scorched with even greater hatred than before. The other two wolves that had remained in the room lifted their faces. Their eyes fell on a figure much shorter than they were, a figure masked by a beaming skull. The figure was not clad in heavy armor as the wolf knights, but rather a lighter outfit that emphasized lighter movement. It was almost human-like in garb, save for the brilliant knee-high boots that shone with silver light. While the figure didn't even reach a third of the height of the towering wolf knight, the newcomer seemed cloaked in an aura of death dreadfully thicker than that of the wolf knights. In its hand, the shorter creature held a mid-sized sword with an almost translucent blade unlike the blades of the wolf knights. It was Silent Air, the sword relic. The sword had a distinct glow about it as it unceremoniously dangled in the figure's hand. The phantoms had no clue that this sword had fallen in this very vault from the back of a level 8 hunter. The White Wolf's den was the result of a curse left behind by the silver moons on the brink of their extinction. Their visceral feelings towards humanity had a strong influence on the mana material in the vault. Hatred and admiration that were two sides of the same coin. The wolves had envied humans for their power, appearance, and intelligence. These emotions had manifested in the Silver Wolf Knights in their bipedalism, weapons, and the skulls covering half of their faces. But if they were the manifestation of the Silver Moon's mixed emotions, who, then, was this figure fully masked by bone? The White Wolf's den had once lacked the mana material to bring the curse of the Silver Moons to fruition. Now, it had become a perilous cave treacherous enough to defeat and trap level 5 hunters. The shadowy figure wearing the laughing skull stepped forward before the trio of towering wolf knights. The beasts howled, charged with their ancient hatred for humanity. Rudolf de Boud had once possessed absolute confidence in his abilities. After joining the Imperial Knights, he had trained with blood, sweat, and tears to master the lance. His prowess had only improved after he'd switched careers to treasure hunting and soaked up an abundance of mana material. Compared to his new skills as a hunter, his former skills as the top lancer of the Order paled in comparison. When powered by Rudolf, who could break a steel beam in half with his bare hands, the lance relic he wielded, Soaring Dragoon, could pierce thick metal shields. Anyone who managed to block the blow was torn apart from the wind gust generated by the relic's ability. Even still, as a former knight, Rudolf's true forte was defense. His armor, while not a relic, could survive unscathed against attacks from most phantoms. That combined with the shield in his left hand, Rudolf was an iron wall. He was confident he could even match the Griever's legendary immutable. At level 5, Rudolf was a relatively inexperienced hunter, but he was on track to earning himself a moniker. While his party members weren't quite on par with him, they were all talented hunters. It was Rudolf's warranted self-confidence that had led him to accept this quest. Since the White Wolf's den was 2 levels lower than their regular roster of treasure vaults, he had felt no concern about their task. The party had thoroughly prepared too, even though the vault was a much lower level than what they were used to. At first, the journey had been smooth sailing, with Rudolf and his party tearing through phantom after phantom. Then, 3 days in, they noticed a change. The phantoms that materialized in their path suddenly grew stronger. The change was barely noticeable at first, but they had soon become far more threatening than anything expected from the White Wolf's den. If anything, Rudolf's party was too strong. Even with 1 man down, they completely outclassed even the new and improved phantoms of the den. Their initial wariness quickly subsided. As strange as it was for the phantoms to rapidly grow in strength, the party wasn't concerned as long as they could still handle the beasts. The skull-masked wolf knights with silver fur had raised their brows, but even those wolves hadn't put up much of a challenge against Rudolf's muscles, relics, and comrades. At this point, there was no denying the abnormality of their predicament. Still, the party had had plenty of strength left in them, with only a day left on their original itinerary of exploration. Rudolf had weighed his options but soon decided to press on. On what was supposed to have been their final day in the vault, Rudolf had encountered something even more peculiar. A shorter wolf knight wearing the full skull mask, the incarnation of the Silver Moon's grudge against humanity. Once everyone was conscious and somewhat rested, We began our doomed journey home. Even in war, retreat was the time when the most casualties occurred. With half of us injured and the treasure vault clearly out of whack, our fate was out of our hands. The Great Greg was lifting 2 of the larger hunters, Lil Gilbert one of the men, and Ruda the lightest girl of Rudolph's party. The hunters we were rescuing could probably have walked on their own if pushed to it, but it was better to save their strength for when they really needed it. Since Rudolph had the best chance of being useful in a fight, I spent every drop of mana in healing faith to get him walking on his own. He was far from shipshape but managed one heavy step after another in his hefty armor, using his lance as a cane. We walked on under Tino's watchful eye. Since I had no strength or endurance, I was a complete liability, even though I did have the highest level out of us all. Although he looked like he was on the brink of collapsing again, Rudolph spoke clearly.
If that boss shows up, I'll hold it off. I'll buy as much time as I can.
We're not leaving you behind.
Rudolph grunted remorsefully, not acknowledging the response.
Take care of them. Get them to Zebrudia, please.
If given the choice between talent and luck, any hunter would pick the latter. So often did a high-level hunter blessed with talent disappear overnight. It was anyone's guess what Rudolph and his party had been doing in the den in the first place, but they seemed like they'd played it safe enough. Sheer bad luck had gotten them into this mess. The odds were stacked against us, even if we were to encounter one of those giant silver wolves, not to mention the one with the full skull mask. There'd be a slim chance of all of us making it out alive. Rudolph must have been more aware of that fact than anyone else was. Exhausted rescues were always the first to be left behind. Most hunters didn't get to level 5 without having to watch a few friends die.
Don't worry, Master won't let anything happen to us.
The amount of trust she put in me was beyond healthy. The only thing I could do was bolt. The night hiker was a one-man ride, but I could probably manage to fly carrying someone. Luckily, Tino was small enough for me to carry. Worst case scenario, I was ready to ditch the rescues and the rest of Tino's party and fly out of there. Of course, I'd try to get everyone out alive. I'd try my very best, but I also had my priorities straight. Rudolph turned to me and bowed low. Praying to me wouldn't do a thing, though. I was no god. He continued to talk as we traversed the tight passages, as if he was trying to distract from the terror that lurked around the corner.
We only survived because it was toying with us.
Toying with you how?
It had a sword, and it was ridiculously good with it. It parried my best shot. Every one of its blows tore through my shield, armor, flesh, and bone. There's no doubt about it. If it wanted us dead, we would have been in seconds. It injured us all and let us loose, most likely to weaken us and torture us to death. Or it just wanted to let us starve. That thing was smarter, stronger, and crueler than any phantom I've seen.
Even Lil Gilbert listened with a somber expression. Phantoms became stronger and more intelligent the more mana they took in. In lower-level vaults, phantoms were barely indistinguishable from feral beasts, but in upper levels it wasn't unusual for them to understand our language. Those, however, were not likely to show up in a vault like this.
I've been to a level 6 vault just once. Heck, I turned tail and ran from that place without even finishing the quest. The phantom we saw back there was way beyond anything I saw at the time, no doubt about it.
That was ridiculous. There's no way a level 3 vault would become so much more difficult from a little shift in the environment. It was possible for powerful phantoms to appear through a mutation, but I'd never heard of one so much scarier than they were supposed to be.
I know it's hard to believe, but I saw it with my own eyes. We stood no chance. Its swordsmanship was so fierce, it could even match up to the Protean sword.
The Protean sword?
There was no swordsman alive who hadn't heard of him. Lil Gilbert was listening intently. Meanwhile, Tino kept glancing my way. She didn't have to be so concerned. The Protean sword was the moniker of the swordsman rumored to be the best in the capital. He had studied traditional swordsmanship under the Sword Saint and used that foundation to learn pretty much every sword technique there was. This masterful swordsman, a cuss sword nut, was no other than Luke Cycle, a member of Grieving Souls. Hilarious. I must have been the only one there who wasn't shaken by the name drop. Unlike mine, Luke's title wasn't just an embellishment. When it came to sword fighting, he really was the best of the best. Even Ark would be no match for Luke. I refused to believe that this phantom was anywhere near his level. If, however, such a phantom did exist, Luke would have taken it out already. Nonetheless, Rudolph looked deadly earnest. His fear might have been playing a part, but he had at least convinced me that the thing was outlandishly strong. We'd do best to avoid encountering it. No doubt Tino couldn't take it out. Damn it, I thought. I knew I should have waited for Ark. The wolves' howls echoed over and over from beyond the passage, nearly giving me a heart attack each time. Worse, their reverberation off the walls of the den made it impossible to calculate a distance between us and them. Not that I could have pulled off such a thing. If only Red Alert could pick up on scary wolves around the corner, but the relic was pretty hit and miss.
It was short, less than half the size of the half-masked wolf knights and immeasurably stronger than them.
Well, ain't this our unlucky day?
I couldn't have said it better myself. I'd love to have a drink with the man, if we made it out of this, of course. Rudolph had taken out several phantoms on his way inside, but the party hadn't let the unexpected phantoms shake them. Apparently, they dealt with a few of the half-masked phantoms and had just been getting ready to leave when the shorter one had attacked. With how little traffic there was here, they would have been found dead if we hadn't come along. The man Lil Gilbert was helping muttered, as if in delirium.
Rudolph came all this way for me.
Can it, Hellion?
From the sounds of it, Rudolph's party had their own baggage. Whatever that baggage was, it sounded depressing. I couldn't handle any more downers right now, so I shrugged. You can talk it over all you want, we're back in the capital.
Right.
Incredible, Master. You're all-knowing, all-powerful. You're all-knowing, all-powerful.
If I were all-powerful, I would have struck down this treasure vault with thunder and lightning and burned it to the ground. We carried on at a sluggish pace, as fast as the rescues could go. Maybe we were halfway back to the entrance. At around that point, the great Greg cinched his brow and expressed what we were all thinking.
This isn't good, is it?
What's going on?
The howls had grown much more frequent. When we had started our journey to the exit, we'd stopped every time we'd heard a howl. Now, we were spending more time walking in the echo of howls than in silence. Something was going on? We just didn't know what. My 17 safety rings had been whittled down to 5. That meant I'd be dead on attack number 6, and I barely had any usable relics on me. The hounding chain hadn't returned. My shooting rings could still fire. But the wolves had seen that trick already. Firing the rings again wouldn't so much as slow the phantoms down. I did have one item packed with some charge, but my sister had loaded it with a spell that would flatten the entire area. Naturally, that was my last resort. I only had one shot of it, and Aoi's spells lacked in power compared to those that focused on a single target. I was dubious whether it would have any effect on an estimated level 8 phantom. Am I screwed? I feel like I am screwed. Did I not bring the right relics for the job? Everything was unexpected. I hadn't expected this vault to have phantoms that Tino couldn't handle, nor for Rudolph's party to have survived. It was a nice surprise that Tino's party mates had fought better than I had expected, but every other surprise of the day sucked. On top of it all, I'd gone and lost a relic. Maybe karma was at work. Maybe karma was at work. Just then, Tino stopped in front of me.
And Master, something big's coming.
She looked strikingly frail, filled with nervousness that hadn't been there before, which in turn filled me with a strong protective instinct. Lil Gilbert snapped to attention, lowering the rescue from his shoulder and placing him down by the wall. Rudolph lifted his lance, cold sweat trickling down his rocky face. Everyone was ready to fight. I could feel the tension in the air tightening around my shoulders. I had no choice. I pulled Tino behind me and stood before her. Don't let anyone say I don't have a little bit of pride.
Master?
Stay back. It's dangerous. Oh, well, I'd show them the best human missile that had ever flown. The night hiker was almost out of mana, but I was sure there was enough for me to propel myself forward. Not even those silver fiends would expect a human to come flying at them at breakneck speed, so I had one shot. I think. I'd careered into one's armor the first time around, but with a miracle, I could knock one's head off. Of course, that attack would expend one of my lives, but that couldn't be helped. I was so scared, my heartbeat started to slow. Apparently that was a thing that happened. It did occur to me that if this phantom was anywhere as strong as Luke, I'd be slaughtered before I could shout bon voyage. I squinted into the dim passage and at the curve up ahead. Then it emerged. Rudolph gasped. He was a few paces behind me, speechless and colorless with dread. Before us stood a humanoid phantom, its whole face obscured by a human skull. It was only half as tall as a wolf knight, about my height, but it exuded an aura so intimidating that taking on those wolf knights seemed like child's play in comparison to taking on this. The phantom was also much more human-like in appearance, especially in the shape of its head and its hair, although, viewed from the side, it appeared to have canine ears. The figure backed away slowly, a pitch-black sword in its hand.
What is that thing?
It was strong, very strong indeed. Red Alert was starting to heat up. If even I could tell how powerful this phantom was, Lil Gilbert must have felt it in his bones. There was no doubt as to how lethal of a threat this figure was. Then the nail in our coffin arrived. Another human-sized silhouette. This one looked more jovial, wearing a smiling skull. It had forgone the armor, but wore a pair of metallic knee-high boots. As it casually approached the first phantom, I spotted a pair of familiar relics in its grip, the Hounding Chain and Silent Air. I couldn't help but blink and stare as I stared at them.
2 of them?
No. What are we gonna do, Krai?
Even Rudolph, the strongest among us, froze up in the face of these foes. Tino, however, showed the most visceral reaction. She cried out, almost on the verge of tears, and clung in pure terror to my arm.
Master, no. Please help me. I don't want to die. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'll try my best. I'll do anything. Please, anything but that. Help me, Master.
Tino's freakout, which was in stark contrast to her usual composure, left the rest of her temp party and Rudolph stunned. With unnerving slowness, the smiling skull turned to me. Its eyes, unlike the Wolf Knight's, were as dark as the abyss. The warped curve of its teeth, shaping a grotesque smile that lamented the state of the world. I didn't know what was going on anymore. I couldn't believe my eyes. I ruffled Tino's hair to calm her, but left everyone else on the brink of despair. Then, I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. Hey, it's Liz. What's she doing all the way down here? The vast abundance of mana material brought into being an existence becoming of the White Wolf's den. Its mind awakened. Synapses fired in its brain and it gained consciousness. The first emotion this being experienced was not hatred, but exhilaration. All 5 of its senses kicked into gear, delivering an overload of information to its brain. It could see far into the darkness and identify sounds among the distant echoes of the cavern. Strength coursed through its frame, and it knew already how to masterfully wield the sword on its belt. The being, metaphorically speaking, could be described as the king of the Silver Moons, a product of the species' boundless hatred and idolization of mankind. The king closely resembled a human, but was unmistakably distinct from man. However, it still wore a human skull on its muzzle, a manifestation of its identity as a wolf. The abundance of mana material that had accumulated in the den reconstructed the Red Moon into a higher being. Numerous silver wolf knights came into existence, intelligent and weapon-wielding. Those were the henchmen, loyal and powerful knights that served their king. More than a decade after every trace of the Silver Moons save for their curse of a grudge had gone extinct, the den had returned to its rightful state. If Silver Moons had been as powerful as these phantoms were, they would have never been hunted down. These wolves were strong. The 5 hunters that had recently invaded the den were more threatening than those who had come to hunt down the Silver Moons for profit, but they had been no match for the phantoms. Even the strongest of the human quintet, the one with the lance, had proved no threat against the Silver Wolf Pack. Each strike with his lance would have been powerful enough to pierce through their armor, yet it hadn't even connected. The king of the wolves outclassed, hunters outclassed all of humanity in strength, agility, and even intelligence. But unlike the other wolves, the king held no animosity towards humans. It felt only exhilaration. It relished every moment of amusement the humans provided as they fought tooth and nail against their insurmountable foe, and basked in the joy of all hope draining from their expressions. The king was enjoying the hunt so much that it had let the hunters escape into a passage with no way out. The White Wolf's den was a hunting ground. There was only one way out of the cave for the pitiful prey that wandered in: death. Nothing escaped the king's blade. The suffering of the foolish intruders killing them, cornering them, dangling hope of escape before them just to take it away, would soothe the aching void within the wolves. Eventually, they would expand their den, but only once their numbers grew. The king had purposefully stepped away from the boss chamber, where the hunters were sure to return, and was waiting for the right moment to strike when it heard the agonized howls of its kin. Then it came face to face with one grieving soul wearing a beaming smile. It was like a gale, a shadow, a lightning strike, a burst of flame, or else a raging storm.
Huh?
I hadn't blinked or anything, but it looked like the boss phantom had been blasted away. By the time it bounced across the ground and came to a halt, the smiling skull was looming right before my eyes.
What the?
Beside me, Rudolph's eyes were bulging wide. The hilt of his lance clattered against the ground. He had this blank stare that said he couldn't figure out what was going on. No one could follow what had happened. Before the seasoned hunters by my side could lift a finger between them. The laughing skull zoomed closer to me, bright pink hair flowing behind the mask. A cutesy soprano voice escaped from behind it, slightly muffled.
I just want to make sure of something, crybaby.
Tino, still strangling my arm, tried to hide herself behind me. The laughing skull paid her no mind but used her thumb to indicate the boss at the other end of the tunnel.
That's not a new recruit of ours, is it?
Liz's voice was relaxed as ever, and I couldn't help but feel relieved that she was acting the same as she always did. The Wolf King rose to one knee and then to its feet, glowering at the back of the smiling skull-wearer. I certainly didn't recall knowing a violent wolf man like that, although I knew plenty of humans far scarier than the thing. Every hunter except me was more terrified of the laughing skull-wearer. Worst of all was Tino. I forced myself to smile. No. Let's nix the mask, shall we?
That's what I thought. Phew! I didn't think it was the case, but it was wearing that mask and all. Oh, I found these. These are yours, aren't they?
With that, she presented Silent Air and the hounding chain. She was pissed. No doubt about it. Liz theatrically reached for the mask and took it off. No one else moved a muscle. Even the boss wolf stood silently behind her. Long pink hair flowed freely in the air. Her blushed skin, small lips, symmetrical nose, and most of all her brilliant peach-colored eyes composed an adorable profile, but I could feel the heat of an impending explosion simmering below the facade.
A human? What's going on?
It can't be.
The great Greg took a step back, daunted by the revelation. Since he recognized Liz, maybe the great Greg was a fan of hers. At this point, Liz seemed to notice the rest of the hunters for the first time.
What? Don't tell me you don't know who we are? You pipsqueaks call yourselves hunters. You still can't tell, even though Krai's here? I don't believe this. What a bunch of posers. I didn't think there was anyone left in the capital who didn't know grieving souls.
Liz let the smiling skull mask, the symbol of the grieving souls, fall to the ground and laughed in disdain. It was like a gale, a shadow, a lightning strike, a burst of flame, or else a raging storm. Each and every element represented Liz Smart. Her petite frame was bursting with energy like the sun itself. The question was, why was she here? This was definitely her, as far as I could tell from her face and demeanor. My mind was full of questions, and the others were just speechless.
I'm sorry, Crybaby.
Her lips were quivering as if she was trying to hold in a torrent of emotion. She almost looked as if she were going to cry, but I knew better than to expect that.
Your dear Lizzie here is really sad. I ran all the way back after clearing the Night Palace, but you weren't there. Then I heard you went to a treasure vault.
Her words failed her. She was beginning to redden. Her eyes kindled with a scorching flame. The air about her distorted with heat. The heat rising from Liz began to permeate the cold air of the cave. Taking on that treasure vault must have riled her up. It was pretty common for high densities of mana material to make hunters have drastic mood swings. Even so, I couldn't help but think how the Night Palace was not anywhere near running distance from where we were.
I'm sad, so sad, and very, very embarrassed. I trusted you. It must be some kind of mistake, I said. I thought my little crybaby was just being overprotective again. I never would have expected an apprentice of mine to drop the ball taking out the trash.
All the hunters were shaken by the look on Liz's face. Tino looked on the verge of death. I could feel her teeth chattering through her tight grip on my back. Talk about blowing it out of proportion. It's not like Liz was going to kill her.
What the hell's...
But just as the words left his lips, the kid was smashed against a wall.
Ha! Get bent! Can't you see I'm apologizing right now?
A moment later, we heard the sound of armor being pierced. The cave shook. Apparently, Liz had outsped the natural laws of physics. Lil Gilbert was twitching. His eyes rolled back and his armor caved in. His sacrifice would not be forgotten. The great Greg rushed over, helped him up, and poured a bottle of potion on the kid. I admired the guy's guts, but he should have thought that through. Liz had a shorter fuse than anyone I knew. Without so much as another glance at Lil Gilbert, Liz addressed Tino, who was still standing shaking behind me.
Hey, T, what do you think your dear old mentor should do? Am I a bad teacher? Wasn't I training you hard enough? Or have you not got the talent? Maybe you don't have enough watt for power. Hey, answer me, dipshit! You piece of garbage. I taught you better than that. You're gonna make my crybaby hate me? You fucking embarrassment! Kill yourself! You don't want to work hard? Drop dead already! Kill yourself before you get in his way! Bite through your tongue right now!
I'm sorry, Lizzie. I'm sorry it's all my fault. I'm sorry I embarrassed you. It's all my fault because I'm weak. Please forgive me.
Don't you dare apologize to me! Who should you apologize to? Think!
Everyone in that tunnel was aghast, including the boss Phantom. Tino worked hard, like really hard, and Liz hadn't done everything wrong either. This was all on me for picking out such a stupid quest, but if I were to try and take the blame, Liz would have blamed Tino. That's the kind of person she was. As Liz glared at Tino, as if she were ready to smite her, I placed my hands on Liz's shoulders. Liz, Tino worked really hard. She took out a phantom and found these people to rescue, which was the objective of the quest. Yep, she killed it really. Everyone there who knew the real story must have been looking at me like I had two heads, but Liz had no idea what had gone down in the den.
What? She did good? Really?
Yep. I heard they took out one of the big white ones by working together. Really great stuff.
Just one! Is it even worth keeping her alive?
Whatever it was that was bugging her, it made me feel like I was trying to tame an apex predator. Totally. I want to keep her alive, for one, and good job learning to go easy, Liz. I'm proud of you, really.
Oh, you could tell. Awesome, right? I practiced making semi-contact just for you, Krai baby. I know it's really important to you.
All that anger had vanished from Liz as she cheerily patted herself on the back. No doubt Lil Gilbert would disagree with the whole going easy thing, though. That hit had looked pretty full contact from where I was standing. Well, the fact that Gilbert was still alive was a huge step in the right direction. The old Liz would have definitely killed him. I must be some kind of genius to have taught that walking genocide some self-control. Not that I'd done anything in particular to teach her that.
I'm sorry I made you come down here, Master.
Perfect timing. She knew exactly what she was doing after all those years of apprenticing for Liz.
T is talented, you know? Just not enough determination, grit, and willingness to die. She's 100 times weaker than me, so she's gotta work 100 times harder.
Yep, totally. Even though I had no idea what she was going on about. Still, I sensed a certain connection between Liz and Tino that vaguely resembled that of a trusting mentor and apprentice. Although Liz was still stomping the ground in frustration, the majority of her wrath seemed to have passed. She could often be moody and explode without warning, but her tantrums never lasted for long. The boss phantom hadn't so much as taken a step during the entirety of our bickering. It only held its sword at the ready, watching Liz's every move. Although it had been hit by her before, it showed no sign of having taken any harm. Unlike Lil Gilbert's armor, the boss phantom's armor was spotless. I heard footsteps. Another phantom turned the same corner that Liz had. I recognized its hulking frame as it squeezed through the narrow passage. It was one of the Silver Wolf Knights we had encountered in the boss room, the one holding the huge firearm clearly designed for rapid fire. Most firearms used by phantoms could find their origin in a specific period in ancient history when advanced technology had thrived. These weapons could not be recreated with modern technology and were also strong enough to obliterate even the most steadfast of hunters. They weren't easy foes to deal with. The boss looked up at the much larger phantom and jerked its chin to us. The Wolf Knight didn't respond, but turned to us. Then it dawned on me, it wasn't that the boss had been cowering or waiting for an opening to attack. It had just been waiting for backup. Liz was its only threat anyway. The rest of the group was comprised of 6 measly hunters, each with 1 foot in the coffin, a few newbie hunters at full strength, and me and my useless level 8 title. My level was a good bluff against most hunters, but useless against monsters and phantoms. Without even turning around, Liz looked at me.
There's more? Then I'll let you have one of them, T.
What? Lizzie?
Don't let me down.
We were standing 10 meters away from the Wolf Knight, which was way too far away to deal with that firearm, not to mention the boss standing in the way. If Tino took even 1 step forward, she would be riddled with bullet holes. In such a tight passage, the wolf didn't even have to aim. Not even Tino could dodge those bullets. No reasonable hunter could be expected to pull that off. The creak of metal armor interrupted the conversation.
I'll block it. I'll get you an opening somehow.
Rudolph stepped up to Liz's side, shield in hand. Although his green shield had been stripped of some paint and scratched here and there, it was as thick as a thin wall. It wasn't large enough to cover an entire body, but it would protect them from the majority of the bullets. That was promising. What a nice guy. But Liz cast him a sideways glance and sighed.
Whatever, I'm done. Way to ruin the mood.
What?
I wanted T to do it, but I'm tired. I just can't stand Tino making us look bad. Oh, that's it.
Liz's slender fingers retrieved her mask. She slipped it over her face, as if to cover her quivering. As she did, gunshots rattled the cave as countless bullets tore from the giant gun, accompanied by bursts of light. Someone screamed, but soon the gunshots subsided, and the passage was dark again. The wolf had fired at Liz and everyone around us, but no one had fallen. Liz opened her outstretched left hand, letting the same bullets rain to the ground. The wolf knight raised its firearm once more, pissing Liz off again.
You think you can hit me with a normal-ass gun, you little bitch? I'm way beyond the point of dealing with weapons of a physical civilization. I've transcended them. I'm beyond your level. Don't you dare mock me!
Liz didn't seem to move an inch, but the bullets fell powerlessly to the ground.
I don't need a shield. You were trying to beat this slow-as-hell weak-ass thing. Did you learn nothing from your dear mentor? Are you gonna embarrass me again? You useless piece of shit. You better show me you can do this.
Be reasonable, Liz, I thought when I noticed Ruda looking on, pale-faced. Maybe she could actually follow what Liz was doing. Rudolph just stood there, speechless. I, on the other hand, watched with a gentle smile on my face as Liz went nuts. I couldn't really follow her, but I knew what she was doing. That was one of the things that had finally made me forever stomp out my dream of becoming a hunter. It was simple, really. Liz was just grabbing the bullets and tossing them away with her bare hands. That's it. Sure, I understood the theory, but fast didn't even begin to describe what Liz was. The first time Liz had shown me the trick, it had been as though she were showing off a new toy. I still have nightmares about her smile that day. And that lot expected me to go into treasure vaults with them that required pulling off those kinds of superhuman stunts. The shooting stopped. The wolf had run out of bullets. I was curious how the wolf knight would fight with no bullets left, but I would never get a chance to find out. Liz Smart had plenty of weaknesses. She couldn't cast magic, and she killed first and asked questions later. She was ridiculously harsh on her apprentice and couldn't handle sweet food. She couldn't read a room to save her life. However, there was one thing she had going for her. Liz was faster than anyone else in the world. She moved so fast even her own shadow would be left behind, hence the name she was commonly known by, the Stifled Shadow. Liz brushed off her hands and turned back to the wolves. I couldn't see through her mask, but I could easily imagine her expression under it. Then, the massacre began. I couldn't see any of it except for the end result. In a single stride, Liz closed in on the wolf knight and tore through its thick armor before the phantom could even react.
When phantoms are wearing armor, you've got to smash them. Doesn't mean they're any tougher to get through. Beat them from above. Blow their heads off. I don't care how. Just kill it. This has got to be the most fun you've ever had.
The enormous wolf flew into the wall and disappeared, leaving the mark of its impact behind. In a matter of seconds, one of the threats had been eradicated. Without another glance to the wall, Liz turned her smiling skull to the Wolf King. At this point, she was looking more like a phantom than the wolf. The boss stood on guard, clearly a master at the sword, as Rudolph had described. Even from a distance, I felt that I would be cut in half if I entered its sword space. Rudolph's expression hardened, but Liz simply stepped closer as though she were on an afternoon stroll. With a burst of energy, the wolf's sword vanished. No scream followed. Rudolph watched in disbelief. If he were to recount what was happening, anyone would laugh it off as a bad joke. Even in range of immediate death, Liz remained unfazed. The wolf's sword sliced through the air at blinding speed, but it never met its mark. It almost looked as though Liz were dancing with the sword. As a thief, she didn't have much in the way of defense. She'd be in a grave place if she took even a single hit. Still, the blade continued to miss her.
Sword, grab it, parry it, dodge it, whatever. Hey! What's your problem? Why can't you do it?
As if to demonstrate, she pinched the blade midair. The wolf tried to step back, but the sword didn't budge. On par with the Protean sword, was it? Liz had fought against the real Protean sword countless times. That's how the Grieving Souls stepped up their game. The battle before us was already beyond my comprehension, but it was clear that Liz didn't take the wolf to be a threat. It was a good thing they hadn't said anything like that to Liz. She took any insult to her childhood friends very personally. Liz shouted again as she half-heartedly beat up the wolf that let go of its sword. Bare-knuckled, her punches whipped past the wolf's raised arms, pummeling its armor.
Just go away, Bim. If you dodge it, they won't get you. If you get them, they can't dodge it. Just do it. Put your life on the line. You get it, don't you? Don't you? Stop relying on your talent, dumbass. Hurry! Sprint through life. You don't have any time, T. Work 100 times harder than me. I'm getting farther ahead every day that you sit on your ass.
What she was trying to say was anyone's guess, but Liz's flurry of insults had finally pushed Tino into becoming a sobbing mess. Poor thing. Whatever Liz's calling was, it certainly wasn't teaching. Using her boot relic, Apex Roots, Liz kicked the boss in the gut.
I was on cloud 9, damn it!
Ruta watched in horror as Liz's leg pierced through the boss's armor and into its torso. The wolf twitched, howling mournfully into the depths of the cavern as its blood spattered over Liz's mask. I should have chosen a different symbol for our party. Did you let it all out yet, Liz?
Yeah, a bit.
Her voice was calmer now. Tino hushed her sobbing as if to prevent anything from spoiling Liz's mood again. Liz yanked her leg out of the phantom and let the corpse drop to the ground with a wet thud. Seeing that it didn't disappear, the phantom must have been alive, but it wouldn't be for long. That wound was fatal. Already uninterested in the wolf's fate, Liz skipped back to me, her shoes stained and her skin speckled with blood. Liz displayed overwhelming strength and unending violent urges. She was a ball of talent, but not much more. She lacked something critical to the development of human emotion. Yet there stood Liz Smart, the walking genocide of our party that I simply couldn't believe was integrated into human society. Ruta and the others sank to the ground and slumped in a heap. I know, it's tough to believe. She was our thief. She acted more like a brigand. Liz took off her mask. With a bloody finger in her mouth, she looked at me. There was a hint of shyness in her expression.
Oh, I almost forgot. I'm home. Cry, baby.
Welcome home, Liz. Liz jumped into my arms, and I drew her into a hug. She was hot, like fire to the touch. Having donned their brand new grinning skull masks, they all shared a chuckle.
Pretty cool. You designed these, crybaby?
But if we start wearing these, people are gonna be afraid of us. So what? They'll be afraid of us no matter what.
Wearing masks like that made all of them look like freaks, regardless of their sex or size. Once upon a time, 6 children living in a remote town dreamed of becoming treasure hunters. The bravest boy of all loved his sword and dreamed of becoming an unparalleled swordsman. The most curious girl of all sought the road ahead and dreamed of becoming the quickest thief. The kindest boy of all wanted to protect his friends and dreamed of becoming the best paladin. The smartest girl of all had the foresight to strive for power and dreamed of becoming the supreme magus. The weakest girl of all thought well on what she could do and dreamed of becoming a prodigious alchemist. They always had smiles on their faces. As they strove towards their dreams, their gifts and hard work never betrayed them. The grinning skull, as Luke had predicted, grew to become a symbol feared and respected by all. I, meanwhile,
Hey guys, I was wrong.
in the lounge of First Step's clan house, Gilbert took in his temporary party mates. An entire day had passed since their return from the nightmarish quest in the White Wolf's den. Gilbert had been told later on, since he'd been unconscious when he'd been carried out of the den, that the hunters they'd rescued had made it safely back to the capital. The quest was complete. The Association and the Empire would be left to deal with the anomaly in the White Wolf's den. Hunters of higher level would soon be sent to investigate the cause of the changes in the vault.
I always thought I was strong, that I'd grown strong, but I've got a long way to go.
He looked to the purgatorial sword propped up beside him. Gilbert had never faced a true challenge. Even when he found himself in a tough situation, he had always made it out on his own merit. He had been confident that with that, he would eventually become the strongest hunter in the world. But now that he had glimpsed what achieving that dream truly looked like, he understood how far he was from it. He didn't resent Liz for nearly killing him. In fact, he didn't even remember much about that moment. He had had his guard up the entire time. Yet he still had no idea what had happened to him. That in itself was a clear indicator of how far behind her he truly was. In the beginning, Gilbert had started out alone, but he'd grown overconfident as he'd worked with others weaker than him. After leaving them, he had met new talented allies, faced a phantom they could barely defeat by working together, and finally encountered a real-life freak who could mop the floor with a bunch of those phantoms. He assumed that Thousand Tricks, as the leader of the Grievers, must be far stronger than even Liz. Even after paying close attention to every move of the lead Griever, Gilbert hadn't understood Krai's true capabilities, most likely because there was such a vast divide between where they stood. The very short time Gilbert Bush had spent on his mission had been enough to change his outlook forever. While the dangerous quest had reaped almost no monetary reward, Gilbert found it to be rewarding in other ways. In just a day or so, he and his party mates had learned so much about each other.
I couldn't see just how much was ahead of me. The way I am now, there's just no way I'll make it there. I'm gonna apologize to my old party. Train from the ground up. Start over.
I see.
Hunters grew. They grew through battles, through losses, and through knowing what stood at the peak. So many of them gave up on their dreams. However, even in the face of great failure and hopelessness, Gilbert's eyes burned with determination. There was nothing else Tino could say. Gilbert stood, looking as if a fog had lifted. He took one more look at his party members before turning to Tino.
If you don't mind, thank Thousand Tricks for me. Tell him sorry I caused so much trouble. And, let's see, tell him to watch. I'll be grabbing bullets in no time.
I don't think so.
Gilbert pointed directly at Tino's disbelieving face.
Don't get it twisted. I haven't given up on becoming the strongest hunter. I'm just changing how I'm gonna get there is all. I'll be there soon enough, and I'll catch up to you too, party leader. See ya.
Gilbert was about to leave when Ruta called after him.
Oh, Gilbert, you forgot this.
She pointed at the purgatorial sword. Forgetting one's weapon, one's lifeline, was unthinkable for a hunter, but Gilbert didn't turn around. He only shouted back,
I don't need that anymore. I don't deserve it yet. That's a powerful sword, but I can't get stronger if I keep relying on it. I'm gonna learn to catch a bullet with my bare hand like the stifled shadow can.
Right?
Take it as a gift for Thousand Tricks. No, I'm, just asking for him to hold on to it until I'm strong enough. Just you watch. I'll be right back here to reclaim it.
You haven't changed at all, kid.
even without its power as a relic, the purgatorial sword was a potent weapon. After using it for most of his hunting career, Gilbert would face a tough road ahead without it. He knew that, of course, but the boy had decided to leave his sword behind nonetheless. This was out of a kind of resolve that only he could understand. No one could ruin that for him. Tino frowned for a moment and then called after him.
Gilbert.
What? Don't try to stop me.
No, I'm not gonna stop you or anything.
Tino imagined that Gilbert would grow very strong. When their temporary party had been formed, she hadn't been able to see anything in him, but he had been appointed by her master, after all. After a deep breath, Tino lowered her shoulders. She wished Gilbert a bright future as she said,
Lizzie's mask is a special one without eye holes. She was completely blind when she caught the bullets. Maybe you should keep that in mind if you want to do the same as her.
"What?" was all Gilbert could mutter. What a day. I was both mentally and physically exhausted. My safety rings were my ace in my pocket. My last line of defense. Using over half of them indicated just how close to my demise I'd been.
Good work, Krai. I hear the association's up in an uproar.
Haha. I was leaning back into my office chair, rocking to and fro. The anomaly of the White Wolf's den was on a very unusual scale. Somehow we'd managed to get everyone back alive this time around, but this sort of disturbance was usually only noticeable after several hunters had lost their lives. If Liz hadn't ran home, leaving everyone behind, if she hadn't jumped into the den despite her exhaustion, 10 hunters including yours truly would have perished in there. I looked at Liz, who was sleeping on the couch, cradling her knees. She was definitely exhausted, seeing as she wasn't even stirring. It would have been an adorable sight had it not been for the eerie mask over her face. I was the one who designed that mask, of course. I was also the one who'd forgotten to punch eye holes in them, but I couldn't be blamed for my party continuing to use them regardless. My friends were still improving at the same breakneck speed that they had been when we had first arrived at the capital. The difference between them and me was growing by the day, but perhaps that was my fault for not venturing into treasure vaults with them. Still, if I was 100 times crappier than them now, I wouldn't even begin to get closer to them by simply showing up. That much had been made painfully obvious after getting my lazy behind handed to me in that treasure vault. We had wanted to be heroes. That had been our goal ever since we had decided to become hunters. I wondered if any of my friends realized they were already heroes to me. Each of them could do a little work on their character. A lot of work, in fact. but I couldn't deny that they were somehow managing to survive in human society as they were. I let out a long sigh. I'd made up my mind. I'm going to quit treasure hunting. Eva looked at me as if to say, not again. I knew she wouldn't believe me after all the times I'd threatened to quit. This time, though, I meant it. I learned my lesson after putting Tino and her party in danger. I'm not strong enough to be on the front lines. I'd been away for so long, I was useless in there.
I believe Tino chose the words, Master is God.
I feel bad for what happened to Tino. I don't prescribe that quitting is accepting responsibility, but I can't go through that again. I'm getting too old for this stuff.
You're the top young hunter in the city.
If I keep at the job, I feel like I'm gonna mess up in a way that can't be fixed. That's what I'm afraid of. I have some money enough to move back to the country and retire. I didn't need a fortune or any kind of luxuries. All I needed was enough money to allow me to live out my days on my own terms. How wonderful would it be to not have to fear for my life at every turn? I'd be safe at last. I couldn't take on phantoms again. Just reliving what had happened in the den made me shiver. I'm never playing human missile again either. Even little Gilbert and the great Greg were talented, all things considered. There was no place for me out there anymore. Times had changed. The golden age for treasure hunters gleamed a little too brightly for me to handle. Eva pushed up her glasses and gave me a dirty look.
Just to be clear, there will never be a peaceful life for you, Krai, unless you change that face of yours or something.
Way to bring down the mood. If only Liz hadn't destroyed Reversible Face. I think I just need to go far enough away where no one knows me. My face is pretty unremarkable. I could even fake my death to... Just then, I was interrupted by a pair of arms wrapping themselves around my chair from behind.
Hee. If you quit, I quit too.
The chair creaked under the weight of both of us. I looked back at the couch, but sure enough, only the mask was left there. If I recall correctly, she was fast asleep just a second ago. Is this some sort of astral projection or something? No, you're dreaming, Liz. Well, it had been the dream of all the Grievers to reach level 10, the pinnacle of treasure hunting. I'd given up early in the game, but the others still had a shot at getting to where almost all other hunters couldn't. Liz was only at level 6, but that was because some of her points had trickled up to me. If it wasn't for me mooching on the party, she would have been level 7 at least. Liz was still beaming, rubbing her cheek against mine. I could feel her warmth through my cheek. A hunter full of energy always ran hotter than the average person. The heat I felt was yet another indicator of our difference in strength.
Yeah, but if you're quitting, what's the point? There's no point making it alone. Besides, I'm already the strongest.
She spoke with a sweet cheerfulness, but I knew full well that her dream couldn't so easily be forgotten. Treasure hunting was a talent, but that talent wouldn't shine without hard work. My friends had gone through tribulations harsher than any other hunters our age had. Still, it sounded as if Liz meant it. If I quit, she wouldn't hesitate to leave it all behind and retire with me. Should I quit? I can quit. I shouldn't quit. I don't think I'll quit, probably. Nope, I can't do it. The party will fall apart without you, Liz.
No problem. We'll all quit if you do.
My shoulders quivered. I had nothing to lose, but I couldn't say the same for my friends. They were famous throughout the empire and were incredibly influential. Some of them officially worked for the government, while others always received offers from nobles in the military. If all of them were to retire, they'd have hunters sent after them. High-level hunters. Once they found out I was the reason for their retirement, I'd be at the top of their hit list. It was possible, likely, even that I'd end up dead. There's no way. I couldn't do it. Of course, even without my own mortal peril, I couldn't single-handedly negate all of my friends' hard work. I thought for a while, keen to find some way out of it, but my pitiful brain couldn't think of anything. That's what years away from hunting did to a hunter's brain. I guess I'll keep going a little longer.
Woohoo! Me too!
Liz cheered, her cheek on mine and her legs dangling in the air. No problem, just as long as I don't have to go into any treasure vaults. This was all Gark's fault for shoving that stupid quest on me in the first place. I vowed then and there to never accept any more quests while Ark wasn't around and turned firmly away from reality. It was a revolutionary weapon, a life form distinct from any other that had come before it. It contained in its body a function of great taboo that all scholars only dreamed of creating, but, because of the great dangers, ultimately forbade themselves from fulfilling. Upon its creation, the being felt an insatiable, near unbearable hunger. However, it overcame its instinct using the intelligence it had been given. Trapped in the darkness of a small metallic capsule, the being forced itself to change, to evolve, and adapt to its environment. Over days and days, the being reconstructed its slimy form until it could pass through even the barrier that was a sealed metal capsule. When it did eventually escape, however, the being remained trapped by a secondary barrier of an entirely different matter than the metal lining of the capsule. The barrier was constructed in a way that prevented the being from breaking through it. So it waited, it understood, with an intelligence far too developed for a magical creature of a liquid body, that one day the door would open and release with it by far the worst creation the prodigy alchemist had ever created. And finally, its time had come.
What? Bodyguard.
She had just been preparing to take on a treasure vault assigned to her by her mentor as part of her training. Her beloved master was standing before her, smiling a guilty grin. That was Krai Andrey, a hunter with one of the highest levels in the capital. As the sun was high in the sky, there was no one else present in the clan lounge. This wasn't an unusual sight. Hunters mostly worked by day. Krai was dressed almost too casually for his occupation, without any protective gear. Upon closer inspection, however, Tino's master carried an absurd number of relics. It was no secret that practically everything he wore, the chain on his belt, his silver necklace, and the cufflinks on his sleeves, was a relic. Rumor had it that habit had earned him the moniker 1,000 Tricks. As Tino watched him blankly, Krai refused to meet her gaze. Yeah, I just felt like going to the relic shop today. I was going to ask Liz or someone else, but I couldn't find them, so...
I'll accompany you.
Right, I know it's a hassle, but I think you'd learn a thing or two from looking at some relics. Yeah, you should get one, actually. It's high time. This'll be as much good to you as it will for... Wait, really?
Yep.
Krai looked on in surprise as Tino swiftly packed away her reference materials and stood from her seat. As important as it was for Tino to prepare for her life or death mission ahead, her master's request was of much greater importance. Her only reason for faltering was his choice of word, bodyguard. To her, it just didn't make sense. Tino had received high praise for her skill, but she was still only a level 4 hunter. She looked to her master with expertly puppy-dog eyes.
But Master, I'm but a speck of dust compared to you. I doubt I'll be of any use to you.
Speck of dust must be your favorite phrase, Tino. I've heard you use it more times than everyone else combined. Tino still wondered how she could be of service as a bodyguard when she was far weaker than the man that she would be guarding. If Krai had asked Tino's mentor as he had intended, that would have been slightly less far-fetched. Stifled Shadow, a thief like Tino, far surpassed Tino in both threat detection and combat. What's more, a bodyguard was hardly necessary within the safety of the capital. Oh, it'll be fine. We probably won't be attacked, and, just think of it as a date or something.
A date?
Tino stared at Krai. She had idolized her master for years. At least a small part of her devotion was fueled by romantic feelings. The problem was that her mentor adored Krai with all of her heart. Competing for his affection was unthinkable. To Tino, Krai was far beyond her reach. She could count on him to give her attention when she asked for it, but she didn't dare ask for it too often. Tino didn't care that the relic shop wasn't exactly the most romantic spot in town, nor that her master dragged whoever he could get his hands on to accompany him on his hobbies. She could even overlook playing second fiddle to her mentor. Tino evaluated her outfit. A leather jacket that sacrificed fashion for protection, shorts optimized for dexterity, and black combat boots lined with steel soles. The large dagger and the potion bottle on her belt completed her treasure hunter look. She didn't look bad by any means, but the outfit was very plain for a date. In fact, she was dressed for the battlefield, but going on a date was a whole new type of battlefield for Tino. As Liz Smart's only apprentice, Tino couldn't afford to lose to her either.
I'll go change.
She moved to stand, but Krai caught her arm. What? No, there's no need to... Hey, Tino!
Forgive me, Master. I can't go looking like this. I may never be stylish enough to be by your side, but this is a matter of a woman's pride.
Don't be like that, Tino. I'd feel bad, so let's just go. As Tino swung around to escape, Krai heartlessly unleashed his hounding chain.
You're a cruel, cruel man, Master.
In the end, she hadn't been allowed to change her clothes. With the hounding chain keeping her at Krai's every beck and call, there was nothing more Tino could do. The streets of the capital were bustling as they always did. Tino walked with an appropriate level of wariness beside her smiling master. As she did, she wondered if, to passers-by, she and Krai looked to be on a date. Probably not. At best, someone might peg them for hunting buddies. If she had only managed to change her clothes, she might have had a shot. A better shot than she had at that moment anyway. Tino made no effort to disguise how disgruntled she was. Krai patted her arm. You don't have to be so grumpy, Tino. Don't worry. You already look very strong.
You should learn to treat girls a little better, Master.
Strong? Weren't they on a date? I'm kidding. Here, if we hold hands, it'll look a little more like we're on a date. Her master laughed heartily and reached for Tino's hand. She decided to accept her master's atonement and forgive him for all of his indiscretions thus far. Glad you're so easy to please, Tino. Good girl. He ruffled Tino's hair, making her melt at his touch. It didn't matter to her that she was playing right into his hand. This felt like a real date, kind of.
Master, complimenting me like that will only get you 10,000 guild at most.
That was Tino's current life savings. Apprenticing had a lot of expenses. That won't even get me a single relic. You're useless, Tino.
You know I was joking, right, Master? Right?
The pair turned off the bustling main street, a popular romantic destination, taking an alleyway that ran off to the side. Krai took Tino through a maze of tight alleys until they arrived at a relic shop with a rather subdued exterior. Tino's hopes of experiencing a normal date were shattered when she read the sign above the door. This wasn't the first time her master had dragged her to a relic shop. In fact, she had accompanied him to this one Magi's Tale on several occasions. Apparently, the shop had been standing for over 100 years and was a hidden gem of the capital. Tino frowned at the bell depicted on the sign.
Master, am I just an entry ticket to you?
Uh-huh.
I'm so sad. I'm going to be sick?
Uh-huh. Tino's master had completely brushed her out of his mind. She clutched his arm in shock, but he showed no sign of noticing her as they stepped through the door. The relic-chilled air cooled Tino's cheeks. In contrast to the dingy storefront, the interior of the shop was neat. The shelves were filled with numerous relics were organized by their shape. Relics were far more precious than most jewels. A fully armed security guard raised a brow as Krai casually sauntered in with Tino clinging to his arm. But he soon regained his stoic expression as he recognized Krai. Tino knew her master was a regular at this shop, having purchased at least 10 relics here. And those were only the ones Tino knew about. Still, his eyes shone with excitement at the sight of the merchandise. She suspected he had forgotten they were on a date. There's not much. I guess I come here too often. Any restocked safety rings? Nope.
I thought you were out of money, Master.
Relics were a natural resource and only made their way to the shelves of stores like this, won by hunters selling them. Hence, the inventory seldom changed. I would love some ice cream, Master. If there's no new relics, why don't you come back another day? The snack will be my treat. Tino never said those words out loud. As much as she was enthusiastic for a date with her master, she had little interest in relics. Her mentor had warned that it was too early in her training for her to wield one, and she offered most of the relics she found to him. That was why she was so poor. There was also another reason Tino was so unhappy to be here. After a quick perusal of the shelves, Krai sighed and went over to the empty counter. Banging his hand on the surface, he shouted, "Hey, Matthews! I brought Tino. Tino's here." A man in his 60s or 70s emerged. He had a full head of white hair and deep wrinkles on his face. Matthews was the shopkeeper of Magi's Tale, a master of his trade who had been appraising relics for 5 decades. His eyes found Krai, making the old man give off quite the bull-headed impression. He clicked his tongue.
You again.
Is that how you greet one of your best customers? Let This Grieving Soul Retire by Tukikaj, cast by Artale Studio. If you are interested in creating your own audiobooks, please check out our website at artale.ai. Now enjoy the story. Tino had found Matthews's attitude blasphemous at first, but she had come to realize that his manners were par for course. As she stood there, stone-faced, her master grabbed her by her shoulders and shoved her up to the counter. Matthews was a skilled trader with good connections and a wide selection of merchandise, but he didn't sell to those he disapproved of. Many hunters in the capital avoided Magi's Tale for that very reason. Matthew's disgruntled expression wavered almost imperceptibly as he noticed Tino. For whatever reason, he liked her. "See? I brought Tino. Take me to the back, or you'll never see her again."
Master, were you just after my body?
Uh-huh. This was why Tino hated coming here, being reduced to a ticket to the back. The back of the store was Mathis's workshop, piled high with unappraised relics kept from the public eye. The first time Tino had tagged along, her master had been allowed passage behind the counter. Having found his golden ticket, Krai had begun frequently bringing her along. She wasn't harmed in any way, and she didn't dislike the shopkeeper with the death glare. Still, she couldn't help but feel dejected every time. She obviously wasn't her master's bodyguard, let alone his date.
There's nothing back there you'd be interested in.
Well, I was really hoping I could show Tino some relics. Even Tino knew that was a lie. Seeing that Mathis was still unconvinced, Krai pushed Tino another step closer to the shopkeeper. Reluctantly, Tino decided to play the part. Although she felt guilty for Mathis, she couldn't refuse her master's command. As a form of meager protest, she maintained expressionless and monotone as she said,
Please, show me all you've got, Granddaddy.
As Mathis choked on air, Krai ruffled Tino's hair. The workshop behind the counter was much larger than the store out front, but the space seemed more claustrophobic due to the unorganized piles that dominated the space. Brilliantly bound but faded books crowded the bookshelves on the walls and overflowed onto stacks, scattered around the workshop. Unfamiliar equipment was strewn atop a metal table. Tino suspected it was used for appraising relics. Countless crates covered the floor, each of them stuffed with relics she had never seen before. Mostly likely they were all scrap. Relics were echoes of the glorious past, recreated by mana material. They came in all shapes and sizes, and contrary to popular belief, most relics were completely useless. Scrap relics didn't have so much as the slightest effect, even if they could be charged with mana. However, discerning whether a relic was scrap or not wasn't an easy task for a hunter. Any famous form of a relic or one that produced a noticeable effect was easily distinguished, but analyzing relics that lacked those traits required in-depth knowledge of past civilizations. What at first glance appeared to be a scrap relic could turn out to be useful upon further inspection. Since a single powerful relic could buy a mansion, hunters usually retrieved anything that resembled a relic and had each one appraised. Tino didn't see the appeal in this, but she knew that some hunters made a living exclusively by retrieving unknown relics. It was a form of gambling, she supposed. She sat on the chair offered to her and dangled her feet as she watched her master and Mathis deep in discussion. She saw Krai's eyes gleam at the sight of the relics on a table. He didn't spare a thought for her.
I thought we were on a date, Master, Tino wanted to say. She had lowered her expectations from the moment she'd realized they were going to a relic shop, but being completely left out still hurt. For a moment, she wondered what her mentor would do at a time like this, but she quickly chased the thought out of her mind. If she hoped for too much, she could end up losing everything.
Her master seemed oblivious to her steely glare as he rattled off something. Tino didn't understand, identifying the relics by sight. Soon, he remarked, Don't tell me you're getting rusty, Mathis.
You've got some nerve. I don't control what these idiots bring in.
Tino couldn't really follow their conversation. She preferred kicking to using a relic, but she vowed to study her relic lingo before her master invited her to accompany him again. Of course, this wasn't the first time she'd made this vow, but it was a difficult one to fulfill in the little time she had between training and treasure vault exploring. Krai finally finished inspecting the pieces on the table. Evidently, there were no hits. Tino was ecstatic, knowing that they could finally leave. If she asked on the way home, he might take her somewhere that resembled a proper setting for a date. However, the light of the end of the tunnel was quickly extinguished as her master began rattling a crate of scrap relics.
Master...
Oh, sorry. Just a little longer, Kay? Damn it, nothing but trash. These won't do at all.
A little longer? How many hours?
There were an obscene number of crates on the floor, and even more piled high along the walls. There must have been a total of 100 or so, packed full with obvious scrap. When a relic wasn't shaped like anything useful, it was most likely a useless piece of junk.
Hey, don't leave the girl alone. What's she supposed to do? That's what I get for letting in a relic junkie.
Uh-huh. Krai produced something from a crate and tossed it to Tino, who caught it with both hands and timidly observed it. It was a steel gray ring, clearly cheap and useless. Tino looked as confused as ever.
That shooting ring's a piece of trash worthless junk that fires off magic bullets that deals no damage, and it drains as much mana as the real deal. The bullets aren't even bright enough to create a diversion.
What did you want me to do with this, Master?
Even Tino could tell by listening that it was a useless scrap piece. I'm a bit busy. Why don't you practice using a shooting ring with that? Have Mathis teach you.
What? What?
Mathis inhaled, ready to raise his voice. Oh, yeah. If you master that thing, I'll get you a proper one, if I have any money left over. Cool?
Why, yes, I'll master it. Please teach me.
Sure. I've got a target out back. Are you sure about this?
Mathis looked pityingly at the suddenly enthusiastic Tino, but she didn't mind. As long as she walked out of this with a ring her master bought her on their date, she didn't care what she had to endure. Tino hadn't expected a surprise like this. She had never used a shooting ring before, but she knew it was one of the easiest relics to handle. That meant failure was not an option. Every sense of dissatisfaction melted away from Tino as her competitive spirit blazed. With a glance to her master, who had resumed his relic hunting, Tino tightened her fists. The shooting ring proved difficult to handle. Tino just couldn't get a feel for it. She'd known that controlling any relic was a difficult task, but she hadn't expected it to be this challenging. At first, she couldn't even activate the ring. As she stared confusedly at the ring on her finger, Mathis walked her through the process. After an hour of grueling trial and error under Mathis's supervision, Tino finally fired a shot. A faint ball of light like a spherical fog materialized at the tip of her forefinger, flew into the ceiling, and dissipated without a sound. Tino stood blinking at the ceiling.
Good job. It takes talent to master a relic in an hour, even a simple shooting ring like that. Maybe it's a good match for you.
Thank you.
She had never activated a relic before in her life. Although she had held several relics of her own, she had never thought to try and use them. Her mentor had told her to wait on it, that she should train her body and mind before training to use a relic. I don't gel with relics, her mentor had said. It's just faster to slug 'em. I can barely get one working. Can't imagine how he lugs dozens of them around. Those words hadn't clicked with Tino until now. It did seem faster and simpler to kick the enemy in the face than to use anything like this shooting ring. The relic exercised a different part of her, and the shooting ring was one of the easier relics to use. She could easily see how mastering each relic took so long, and why a hunter who wielded several relics would be so rare. She would lay off using them for a while.
The next step's aiming with the thing, but it should be easy now you've got the bullet going. Most shooting rings shoot straight. Want to take a break?
No, I'll keep going.
Tino didn't feel particularly inclined to practice any further, but she had an objective to meet, forcing her exhausted mind to push through. She recalled how her master had used his shooting ring and pointed her finger at the target. Just then, Tino felt her dear master's eyes on her. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She wasn't nervous. As Mathis had said, hitting a target shouldn't be difficult. Tino already had superb dagger-throwing skills, as well as great vision and spatial awareness. Hitting a target so close with a blade or stone should be a piece of cake. While magic bullets were fired by a different mechanism, the spheres flying straight made it even easier to hit the target. Krai hadn't specified that Tino only had one shot, but she was eager to prove herself. Concentrating, she opened her eyes. She stretched her arm out towards the target and fired the magic bullet. The bullet, glowing soft enough to fade into thin air, flew straight into a bullseye. Good job, Tino. I knew you could do it. Those simple words were enough to make Tino's heart leap, even though she didn't think she'd worked too hard. All things considered, she held back her smile and coolly said,
It's all thanks to Mathis.
I didn't do a thing besides teach her the basics. The rest was her hard work.
Mathis was acting humble, but Tino knew she could have never activated the shooting ring on her own. She owed him big time. Perhaps the next time she came, she'd bring a token of her gratitude. Tino looked excitedly at her master. She'd done it. Not only had she activated the shooting ring, but she had also hit the target. Hitting the target even farther away would have been just as easy. Shooting rings came in various forms and materials. Some were silver, some were gold, some were colored or bejeweled. Prices varied greatly based on the ring's abilities. Tino didn't care about the abilities, though. She hoped that her master would pick her a pretty piece, but she would happily accept anything he picked out for her. While Tino awaited his next word, Krai turned to Mathis, holding a small leather pouch.
Where is my ring, Master?
Speaking of, Mathis, I found this in one of the crates.
Leave it to you to dig up something like this.
Tino could hardly wait to pick out her ring, but she had enough patience to indulge her master's obsession for now. Everything in the crates was supposed to be scrap, and Mathis had a trusty eye for relics. She doubted anything in there was up to her master's standard. It's a defective magic bag. I can't find any way to make use of it. Tino's brow twitched at the mention of the famous relic type. Magic bags had the ability to expand space. Simply put, magic bags could accommodate a lot more than they looked like they could. While the feature itself could be replicated with modern magic, many of the magic bags found in treasure vaults came with additional features. The magic bag was the first relic to come to mind to many. When they thought of an item that traded for astronomical prices, depending on their capacity and quirk, they were rarely found and very useful, making them extremely valuable. Tino nervously wondered what a defective magic bag was like.
You can only put chocolate in it.
Excuse me? What? For a brief moment, she forgot all about her ring.
It can fit a lot of chocolate and make it pretty much weightless, but the opening's too small to fit anything significant, and you can't take everything out at once. Yep, it's definitely garbage. It's probably a recreation of a child's candy bag from a civilization advanced in magic.
What a heap of junk. The original finder of the bag must have been gravely disappointed. No doubt they'd thought they'd found a magic bag, but it had turned out to be a candy carrier. It was a curious piece, but Tino doubted that even her master would be interested in it. Will it really only fit chocolate?
Just chocolate.
No room for cookies or ice cream?
Not a chance. With a relic like this, I took my time checking. Only fits chocolate.
What a useless relic. Tino watched with bated breath, patiently waiting for her reward. Krai stood groaning, cross-armed. After some time, he nodded and said, "That's a score." "No way, Master." Tino couldn't help but lament.
You're going to hell? One day, Krai.
Why? What a great score. I didn't expect such a find from those crates of scrap. This is what relic shopping is all about. After enduring Mathis's signature sass, Tino and I left Magi's Tale. My bodyguard followed me, as gloomily as a ghost. Thanks for the loan, Tino. I'll pay you back soon.
It's okay, Master. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
A magic bag was a magic bag, after all. I had brought a decent amount of cash, but that still hadn't covered it. I'd only been a bit short, so I'd borrowed the difference from Tino. Luckily, it had all worked out. Now that I had spent my money, I planned to head back to the clan house and get to stuffing my new find with heaps of chocolate. Well, it should fit chocolate bars at least. That'd be perfect. What a night it'll be. I was so excited, I could have danced all the way home, but Tino's steps were heavy. She must have been tired from practicing using the shooting ring. I'd given her a compliment already, but another couldn't hurt. Great job, Tino. You can use a shooting ring anytime now.
Yes, even though I don't have one. I don't have one.
What's with the doom and gloom? Well, I guess a shooting ring wouldn't do you much good. They're not that powerful. They're mostly for hunters lacking in damage output.
I hate you, Master.
With that, she darted off. I didn't even have time to call after her. She was gone before I knew what had happened. Tino could run fast. She was a thief, after all. I was left alone on the street, dumbfounded. Passers-by looked at me pityingly now that a girl had run away from me in tears. I squinted in the direction Tino had run off in, but I had no chance of catching up to her. I couldn't very well use a relic, or anything. Tino was usually calm and collected, so it was shocking to see her like that. I replayed the day's events in my mind. I thought I'd just brought her along to the relic shop as my bodyguard like usual. Well, I supposed I had ignored her for too long. We had arrived at the shop during the day, and now the sun was nearly setting. Bumming off of her might not have been the smartest idea either. Maybe I'd relied on her too much because she was always such a good kid. I'd be careful next time, and I'd apologize to her when I saw her again. I'd maybe even make it up to her somehow. Having promised this to myself, I walked home alone as the sun set over the city. Later, when Tino was thrown into the White Wolf's den, her shooting ring practice would come in handy. But that's another story. Bonus short story. 1,000 Tricks Resolution. Maybe I should work out a little? For years, I had abstained from treasure vaults because I hadn't been able to stand my lack of talent compared to the talent of my friends. I thought I'd made peace with how weak I was, but when, in the White Wolf's den, I'd had to come to terms with just how out of shape I was, I'd felt a kick in the pants strong enough to make me want to improve myself for once. Treasure hunters maintained their immense power only as long as they continued venturing into treasure vaults. Tragically, mana material rapidly leaked out of hunters when they slacked off. Still, not being able to keep up with Tino while I was perfectly well and she'd had a bum leg had been a tough reality check. And that wasn't all. The rest of Tino's party had consisted of hunters who hadn't exactly been rookies but had been far from being veterans, and yet every single one of them had out-hunted me. The ship had long sailed for me to catch up to the other grievers, but my performance in the den had been flat-out pathetic.
What's up, crybaby?
I was just thinking I hadn't trained in a while. I had made sure to at least keep from gaining weight, but I hadn't taken up any proper training. No amount of hauling ass was going to keep me alive in the kind of vaults the grievers were delving into nowadays. Anyone lacking in talent or hard work stood no chance in high-level vaults.
What? You're perfect the way you are.
I grunted. Truth be told, some measly training here and there wouldn't put a dent in fixing my problem. Of course, I could never train to be as strong as the great Greg or Lil Gilbert, nor as fast as Tino or Ruta, but this was just a matter of pride. Watching Tino and her party had made me feel like a loser. Liz wrapped herself around my arms. It was hard to believe from the soft peaks pushing up against me that she was far more robust than I was.
Besides, if you get any stronger, what are the...
I wasn't sure if she was being cocky or nepotistic. Maybe it was both.
If you have all that time on your hands, won't you play with me?
She said, nuzzling my arm. I hated to point fingers for my own laziness, but I felt like these interactions contributed to me falling way out of shape. Tightening my fists, I rose to my feet, Liz still clinging to me. I'll train myself from scratch.
That's not really your style.
How bad were my prospects that an elite hunter like her could see how unfit I was for the job? And why was I still a hunter anyway?
But if you insist, I'll build you a regimen.
Then, with a beaming smile, she began presenting me with training options tailored to high-level hunters.
First, you run as fast as you can until you collapse. It builds stamina and makes you faster.
Uh-huh? Wait, what?
Then you swing your weapon until you collapse. That builds strength. You add weights as you get used to it. After that, you spar until you collapse. You build resistance to pain, and it works you out from top to toe. Efficient, right? That's the basics.
Apparently, the word moderation wasn't in Liz's dictionary. How did training until you collapse even make any sense? That meant no matter how much I trained, it would never get any easier. And all of that was the basics? Won't all that overtraining damage your body? Personally, my sanity would crack even faster than my body would. This was insanity.
Of course it will. Don't you worry. We've got plenty of healing potions to pick you up again. I didn't have much money when I was training, but that's not a problem anymore.
The problem was very much intact. I flashed her a smile, matching the size of hers, and said, I don't think that's my style.
Right?
I couldn't imagine whose style it was to endure such sadistic training. I shuddered as I recalled Tino sprinting with her injured leg.